Hello and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Board of Supervisors, 8/17/2020. Tonight, if you'd like to call in for public comment, you'll dial 646-558-8656 and enter meeting ID 873-3246-3150, followed by the hash or pound sign. If you are watching live on YouTube or Facebook, please note that there's a slight delay, and if there's something that you're interested in speaking on, to call a little bit early. We will start the meeting tonight, and first I will have Fred.
Thank you, Monica, and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors for August 19th. I call this meeting to order, and please join with me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. I'll call the roll. Supervisor Bundy.
Here.
Supervisor Grenier.
Here.
Supervisor Lewis.
Here.
Supervisor McCartney.
Here.
And I am here. We have a quorum. Going right along. Item 4, COVID update. Ms. Ferguson, anything new?
Monica, are you there? Do you want to talk about this one?
For the COVID updates, yes, I would like to talk about this one. I'd like to talk about the 9/11 Memorial Night. This year, we're going to do things a little differently because of the COVID-19 restrictions that we have, and to offer the safest possible event that we can. I have been working with family members of the 9/11 victims, along with our normal event organizers, and we've come up with a plan to have the fountains on for the week for open visitation to pay your respects. And then in the evening, 9/11, starting at 7 o'clock, we are going to do a drive-through to pay your respects. During that time, we're going to, on your radio, you can tune to a certain station and listen to speeches that we had recorded. And if you don't want to go through the drive-through and watch things on TV, we will show a live feed of the drive-through along with this pre-recorded speeches from our, a normal list of speakers, maybe some additions. That's how we're going to do things this year. You can tune in on Facebook, or you can do YouTube Live or our television channel and see everything that's going on that evening starting at 7 o'clock. Other than that, during the week, you can pay your respects at the fountains. We'll have them running for that week.
Thank you, Monica. As we all know, something new every day. Item 5, community announcements. Drive-up movies will be available at Memorial Park August 21st, which will be Footloose, and August 22nd will be Shrek. To purchase tickets, visit www.magav.com, MAEGAV.com. Parks and Recreation, digital recreation opportunities. Information can be found at the lmt.org government departments and the Park Recs page. The EAC will be holding a styrofoam recycling event on October 31st from 10 a.m. till noon in the township parking lot. And of course, this is a reminder that any group or any student group may call either before the meeting or at the beginning of the meeting to say they would like to make an announcement, and we will let them pronounce their announcement at this time. And does the board member have any announcements to make? Mr. Grenier.
Thanks, Fred. I just wanted, as a lot of people know, it's been a long month or so for me. I've been fighting pneumonia for quite some time. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who's reached out and support. Mr. Lewis, thank you for your kind words a few meetings ago when I wasn't able to attend. It's been a rough month. Still not sure if it was COVID related or not, but I was isolated for about 3.5 weeks. And the support that I got was excellent. At one of our recent meetings that I was able to attend, I'm still fighting it. If you noticed, I started the meeting with a button-down shirt and a blazer on, and I had to end it with a sweater because I got sick on myself because the medication's still pretty strong. But we're getting through it, and again, there's been some great people in the community supporting me, and I truly appreciate it. So thank you.
I'm glad to see you're better. Item 6, consider approval of minutes of July 15th and August the 5th, 2020.
I'll make a motion to approve minutes.
Fred, I think I can only vote on one of them. I missed the August 5th meeting.
Okay.
Could we separate them just to?
You're not precluded from voting if you don't want. Just because you weren't there doesn't mean you can't. But if you choose not to, that's fine too. So
I did not know that. Thank you.
James, you want to give your motion again?
Sure, I move to approve the minutes of what were the dates again?
July 15th and August the 5th.
July 15th and August 15th meetings.
August 5th.
August 5th, my apology.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approving both sets of minutes. Any discussion? Any public comment on the minutes, Monica?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, all those in favor of approval of the minutes for July 15th and August 5th signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you. Item number 7, Treasurer's Report. Ms. Bundy?
I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of the warrants lists from July 20th, August 3rd, and August 17th, 2020, in the amount of $2,951,808.84.
Second.
Mr. Grenier seconds. Any discussion by the board?
Is that for both?
For both.
Okay.
Mr. Ferguson?
Just want to point out for those that watch these, that is obviously a big number, but it does include a couple of things in there that includes a liquid fuels payment, in other words, for our road paving of about $920,000. It also includes a quarterly payment to MMA for transmission treatment costs for $450,000. So the two of them, that amounts to just a shade under 1.4 million of that total, which we would not see on every warrants list. So it is higher than normal, but that's the big reason why.
Thank you.
Any public comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor of paying the bills signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Subset B, Bundy?
I'd like to make a motion to consider approval of the July interfund transfers in the amount of $621,513.14.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Hear a second, Ms. McCartney? Any discussion? Any public discussion, Monica?
No public discussion.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the interfund transfers signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Item 8, Mr. Ebert on the line.
Yes.
Let's bring Mr. Ebert in and we can talk about sewer capital expenditures.
They're coming in now.
Thank you, Monica.
Hey, Fred.
Mr. Ebert.
Yes.
You look like Fred, you look like you're on the go.
Yeah, just a little bit. So long drive in from the mountains, but I found some good internet access.
We're ready to go. Anytime
So just for the board's sake, just to set this up a bit, we did these projects out not all that long ago, a couple of months ago. The presentation that Mr. Ebert is about to make with the recommendations that he's going to outline were put forth to the sewer authority because there is one item in here that we believe should be rebid, but I will let Mr. Ebert discuss that with all of you. Go ahead, Fred.
Okay. We can put the PowerPoint presentation up. Okay. as we said, we have received 7 bids, or 7 contracts were bid. The bids were received on July 28th. They were reviewed with the sewer authority and received recommendations from the sewer authority, which I'll go over individually on July 29th. Go to the next screen, please. The first contract, and we had reviewed all these, was the cured in place pipeliner, which is both in the Neshaminy Sewer Authority, or the Neshaminy, which is the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority service area, and the MMA service area. We received 9 bids, which is highly unusual. Normally there are 3 to 4 bids in this, but it was a very attractive job that was timed very, very well when there wasn't a lot of bids out due to COVID. The bids that we received ranged from a low of $259,817 to a high of $455,000. Our 2020 budget was $390,000. As we said above, the low bid was $259,817 by Standard Pipe Services. And basically, we watched these bids go through, and the bidders kept on pulling their bids on and off of Penn bid as they saw the increased number of bids go in. And we discussed with the low bidder why his bid was so low. And it was really because he was able to make a large volume purchase of of the liners at the same size due to other projects that he was recently awarded. The other thing that they did was they basically used their own bypass pumping and access and basically underwrote that down to a very nominal thing. Because of the high flows, we had a rather conservative estimate in there. And this is really the major difference was the competitive bidding market, as well as their ability to just reduce their own costs by using their own equipment for both access, make sure they're not destroying the backyards, and bypass pumping. The recommendation of the Sewer Authority and Ebert Engineering is to award to Standard Pipe Services, LLC, in the amount of $259,817.
So moved. I mean, I'm assuming we want a motion?
Do we want to go through and discuss all of them at once, and then come back to them, or how do you want to do this?
I think once, since we're going to reject one bid, there'll be a motion to reject the bid.
You want to have separate discussion. I mean, you want to have separate votes on each bid for sure.
Yes.
The presentation will be at one time, but the vote should be separate.
I'll second the motion on the table.
Any discussion?
Hey, Fred, do you have any experience with Standard Pipe Services? If so, what's your overall experience with them?
They actually haven't won my jobs, but some of my other clients and engineers that I'm very close with have used them extensively, and they have always done excellent work. They have a good reputation of having all the equipment to get in and handle it. And this is on the smaller range of the size jobs that they do. So yes, they've done that. There was the minimal concerns of change orders on them, which is a rarity. Most of these guys go through that. But they are very well set up. And one of their specialties is doing things out of roadways because they have all the mobile equipment, and that gave them an advantage in this.
Okay, thanks.
Dan?
Yeah, sure. I don't know these guys. Where? A couple quick questions. Where are they based?
Their actual local office where they work out is in New Jersey. I'm not exactly sure where their corporate office is out of.
It's Bear, Delaware.
What?
Bear, Delaware.
Bear, Delaware. Okay.
Yeah.
But the group that actually comes actually out of Flemington, New Jersey, is where their hub is that services us.
Okay. And they're able to meet all bid requirements, all insurances, safety, health and safety, all that stuff.
Yep. Yes. We did that, and we also had their contracts checked by the solicitor's office as well.
Okay.
And we actually checked 5 references.
All right. And they're allowed to, since we're in COVID now, not only, I assume that they have they're okay to work. Not only the type of business that they do, but they have implemented all the necessary requirements to continue working.
Yes, and they also offer that as a shop drawing submittal of what their COVID procedures are.
Good.
So, and they may request permission to also work at night, just so that there is, less impacts around that, and less, while there's not traffic, they're going behind yards, their trucks stay out in their tractor trailer trucks. So they may be asking for a permission to work off hours.
If we say, for some reason, if we were negative in that response, or any other like additional work hours or whatever it may be, does that impact their price?
No, it does not. I asked that question directly.
Cool. Thank
I
you.
asked if there was any contingent things on work hours.
Okay, appreciate that. No other questions. Thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Ebert? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Monica, is there any public comment on this issue?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll make our first motion. We have the first motion. We have the second. Takes the question. All those in favor of this bid, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 5-0. Okay. Number 2.
Can we switch the screen to the next screen, please? This is the sewer manhole rehabilitation. Once again, this is part of our corrective action plan. Work is done in both the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority service area, as well as the Morrisville Municipal Service area. The range of bids was rather high, but the bidder that we have, many people were coming in from out of state and other areas in here. Our budget was $35,000. The range of bids was $34,000 to $113,940. The low bid, as I said, was given by Advanced Rehabilitation Technology, who we're very familiar with. We actually went through, and in order to generate additional competition, we approved 3 other technologies or applications. They're all slightly proprietary, but they are all basically the same. And everyone basically knows that once Advanced Rehabilitation Technology comes in, they're usually a little bidder because of the volume that they do and their reputation. And they do a lot of projects in this local area. So the recommendation of the Sewer Authority was to award to Advanced Rehabilitation Technology in the amount of $34,000.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ms. Blondey is second. Mr. Lewis made the motion. Any comments, questions on this bid?
Sure.
Grenier?
Mr. Same questions. Can you just run it down?
Yeah, I'll try to remember that. We did talk to them about COVID. We asked them if they would, because they did not volunteer to put a shop drawing. We asked if they would. They agreed to do that. They also offer a 10-year guarantee on that. We checked 3 references because I have direct knowledge of them in other townships. So I was very comfortable, and they were actually what we based our bid around. But like I said, everyone competes. They all try to get something that makes them proprietary so that they get an advantage and the only one that could beat. And that's why we allowed or equals in there. But no, and they have no problem with work hours. We did talk about that. We did talk if they would need any assistance from the township. Make sure that's not a cop behind me. Making sure that there was no assistance required for flagging, that they took care of all of their own traffic control. That was a concern in the bid, that some of the people put a very large amount of traffic control, but these are not in high volume areas. Did I miss any?
You got it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll open up public comment. Any public comment, Monica?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, we'll put this bid to a vote. All those in favor of awarding the bid, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Consideration for Brookstone. Mr.
Yep.
Ebert.
Next screen, please. Okay, and Brookstone is composed of 2 contracts, one for mechanical and one for electrical. The reason for that is once you go over $25,000, you have to bid the trades separately, so that you're using the correct prevailing rate wages on this one. So the range of bids was from 270,000 to 598,500. Our budget was 285,000 out of a total budget. So the budget that you saw in the approved budget was for 334,750,000. In the budget, it didn't break out the mechanical and the electrical portion, but that was done as a basis of the bid. The low bid was in the amount of $270,356 to Blooming Glen Contractors. This bid was very close. There was an extreme amount of bidders in this one. I think a lot of that was brought on by COVID. And the lowest three bidders were all within 8.5% of each other. What we did here was we also opened it up in a discussion that we're going to have shortly on another bid, was we opened it up because this was a retrofit and not a new system. We're just replacing pieces and components. There was no standardization already. So we opened it up to a large range of bidders and manufacturers that would meet the performance specifications and requirements. It was base bid on that, and they followed that pretty closely, but they definitely had multiple vendors providing very competitive bidding on that. The Sewer Authority met and recommended to award to Blooming Glen Contractors. I have worked very extensively with Blooming Glen. They've done a number of mechanical jobs. They have also actually just recently completed a emergency bid due to the flooding. They came in on an emergency bid. I did not ask them to submit a shop drawing submittal on their COVID because I literally was working with them during that time period, and they had a written protocol on their job trailer. They also had twice a day, they had internal safety inspectors came out and did this. Blooming Glen is part of the Haynes and Kibblehouse family of companies. So they have a large corporation that follows a very strict, and they actually have safety compliance officers that come out. It used to be for compliance more or less with OSHA requirements and environmental. Now that is extended to include the COVID. Blooming Glen will look for every possible change order. That's part of their game. If there's anything out there, they look for it, they ask for it, but they're honestly reasonable. The fact that they asked for a change order doesn't mean that they're awarded it. They work through it and they realize that, but it's part of their game. And that's the reason that you go through, and you know that going in. The quality of their work has always been above average. I wouldn't say they're the best, but they more than exceed the requirements of the job out there. They are very organized. And one of the reasons that they were able to get this is that they came in with a very clarified statement. They're going to order all the equipment and mobilize one time and go through there. So did I answer all? Are there any additional information the board would like to hear at this point?
Let's make the motion for the consideration of awarding the bid for the Brookstone PS upgrade.
Moved.
So I hear a second.
Second.
Ms. Bundy seconds. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Ebert from the board? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing no further comment, we'll call the question. All those in favor of awarding the Brookstone pump station upgrade bid, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 5-0, thank you. Let's go to the Stackhouse.
Next, wait, one more on Brookstone.
Okay.
Next screen, please. This is a sister contract for the Brookstone. This is for the electrical award. We received bids ranging from 48,000 to 108,000. The low budget was $49,750,000 out of the total budget of 334,000. The low bid was very close to ours, being at 48,195. Probably the top 7 bidders were all within 5% of that. That says the 3 lowest bids are 8.5, but when you look at the span, everyone was bunched, and then the last 4 kind of fell off as they went out. AGM Electric does a lot of work also in schools. They have a very strenuous COVID program. I did speak with them on that. So they basically, what they do is they normally do schoolwork during the summers, and then they do a lot of wastewater work and institutional work in the, what I'll call the off season or non-school building. And that's just kind of how most of these contractors work. We did call a number of references. I've been involved with them on 3 projects, but it was a number of years ago. And all 3, the references were exactly the same as my recollection of having worked with them. I've actually worked with who's going to be the superintendent on this job, who was with another company. And he recently just completed 2 jobs to me. So I was very happy. And that was one of the reasons that they chased this job so closely. I will turn it back over to the board unless they have any additional questions for me.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the second Brookstone Award.
So moved.
Ms. Bundy makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Grenier makes the second. Any more questions or discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll take it to the public. Monica, is there any public comment on this award?
Public comment.
No public comment. Hearing no further comment, we will take it to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 5-0. Thank you. Okay,
Dr.
Mr.
Weiss,
Yes.
before we get to the rejection and the rebids, are we able to reject and rebid all in one motion, or are there 4 separate motions coming?
Mr. Truelove?
You're not gonna like the answer. I think it's best to do 4 separate motions.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ebert, go ahead with the consider rejection of bid Stackhouse Pump Station upgrade.
Yep. Next screen, please. And we can see there's actually 3 bids here. And one of our recommendations is going to be able to bid all 3 of them as a group. But this bid was, the range of bids was $463,490 to $861,000. Our budget was $377,881 out of a total $592,000. We do have a grant for this project. The low bid was in the amount of $463,490. The bid is obviously significantly higher than our budget. And the one of the reasons was we tried to standardize and have one entire system that allowed the vendor to take advantage of it and basically increase the price because he was locked in. And when there were no alternatives that were proposed in there. So what we're recommending to do is to reject the bid, revise the bid to open up the bid to alternative pump and control manufacturers so that no one person can package it and significantly increase the price. We're also going to remove the Muffin Monster because it's not required. We don't have it in all of our other pump stations. It is to reduce the cost, but it also, the Muffin Monster, not removing that allows me to open up the pump and control bids much more. So I should receive bids very similar to what I received on the Brookstone, which should be down into there. The other thing that the contractors were concerned about was the amount of coordination on such a relatively small project, because the mechanical guy has to go in and then do his job, then leave the electrical guy go in, and the person installing the gravity sewer line to bring the wastewater from the existing pump station over and the force main back basically has to mobilize at least twice and most likely 3 times. And that drove that bid up considerably there. So the recommendation is to reject this bid, rebid with a revised design within the next 2 weeks or next week, hopefully. We received significant amount of input back from the contractors of what it would take to ask, hey, can we get down to our budget, or was our budget bad? And they gave us information that would allow us to get down to that budget amount. But I will turn that now over to the board for any questions on this, and then to answer any questions.
Okay.
Mr. Ebert, the Muffin Monster is good for like grinding up things like wipes and stuff.
Yes.
Are we concerned that removing the Muffin Monster will cause larger issues down the road?
There's always concerns for that because and the Muffin Monster that we have in there is probably the best. It is, however, replaced with a manual trash rack. That manual trash rack now has to be cleaned out every day. We have muffin monsters on very few of our existing pump stations. If we were to keep the muffin monster, which I'm a personal fan of, it would increase our budget by $50,000. Which is, while we have saved that money on there, I would have to readjust the budget that I could not come down and meet our budget amount if I kept the muffin monster. My druthers, I would love to. However, is it necessary? No. Do the majority of our pump stations contain muffin monsters? No. Do we have maintenance issues with them? No. Has the world changed since COVID and the amount of wipes that we get? Yes. So we could keep that in there, but then the board would have to realize that some of the capital that was saved on the lining contract, you would have to shift that line item in a budget. So I don't have a problem leaving it in there, but this is a matter of me staying on budget. What do I have to do to keep on budget? And by doing that, it is, I can get around them not being able to lock it in by specifically naming other pump and control manufacturers.
Yeah, the Muffin
Otherwise, they
Monster's
can
a
wrap it in
brand,
one.
but if somebody else has a similar technology, we should be fine then.
Yes, and there is. There's super shredders. Muffin Monster, you're absolutely is a brand. They are the Cadillac, but there definitely are other shredders out there that handle that and also handle wipes. Because with wipes, the traditional Muffin Monster that we used to use, this is also what drove up the cost, was a circular grinder that basically shredded it and made it in long strips, which is fine for toilet paper, other things. When you have the wipes, you need to not only shred one way, you need to shred both ways, both vertically and horizontally, and make them. And you basically have to turn it into a paper shredder.
Yep.
That instead of one that goes long things, one that slices it off in quarter-inch things. That's what drove the cost up, and that's what everyone's going to. So I don't have a problem if the board is allowing us to transfer money from budget, but I don't believe that I would come in at my total budget price with the upgraded Muffin Monster for what we use today. And that's part of this is a difference in, we started the grant, which is prolonged, so the original budget price was grant, got carried over into the budget, and now we're 9 months, almost a year past the time we did the budget.
Yeah.
So that's where if I was going to do the Muffin Monster, I would not do the old fashioned, even though it would save us money. If you're going to do it right.
I'm sorry.
Hey, before we continue, let's make a motion and then we can continue the discussion. So do I
I'll
hear
make a motion.
to-
Yeah, I'll make a motion to reject the bid.
Mr. Grenier
Second.
makes a motion to reject the bid. Ms. Bundy seconds that motion. Okay, let's continue the discussion.
Fred,
Hold on. Kurt was in the middle of a sentence. I'll let him finish.
So well, I will defer. If you want me to ask, I wanted to ask a financial question to Fred, if you wouldn't mind. Fred, if that was included in there, do you believe the bids would come in essentially that everything priced out, rebid would come in at $50,000 over with that being in there? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, $50,000 to $60,000 is a fair assessment.
So what I would say to the board for the discussion would be on the capital item that we have, and it's all mashed into one capital item. The other savings that you had, the cumulative savings in the other projects, the lighting and the other pump station, allows you to have that additional room if that's something you are interested in doing.
Thank you, Kurt. Now, Mr. Grenier.
Thank you. So first of all, congratulations for not even coming close to cracking a smile after saying Muffin Monster at least 25 times. That was impressive. And also a PSA to please, regardless of what the packaging says, wipes are not flushable. They do tremendous damage to the sewer systems, whether it's our pump stations or our sewer treatment plants. Go online, you can see some pretty disgusting videos of what wipes do to sewage treatment. It's pretty awful. It's only becoming a bigger deal. So please, PSA, do not flush your wipes down the toilet. They are not flushable. Sorry for that aside. But yeah, related to that though, the key is there are other brands that may be less expensive. We have discussed a lot of issues regarding the budget this year and last year. So wherever we can reasonably save a buck, I would promote that and would would urge us to reject this bid and see if we can do better with rebidding it. Thank you.
There are downstream technologies that, when it gets to the sewage treatment center, that handle wipes in an aggressive way. That's actually kind of the more interesting part of the visit is where it almost pulps them. It's really cool to watch.
Ms. Bundy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Fred, is it the kind of thing that we could retrofit, meaning bid it without and then have it put in possibly later after more thoughtful discussion, or would that increase the cost higher than the 50 or 60,000 you're estimating now?
It would definitely increase the cost. I don't know what we consider significant. It would probably be $75,000 if I went out and bid a separate one, just because of all the issues, the bonds and overhead. And even if I was going to use a trash rack, I was still considering to put a muffin monster down, because even though we may not own the sewer system, someone else would, and I want to make sure that they can do that and have the ability to retrofit that very easily, because the muffin monster is the correct way of doing it. It minimizes your labor costs, and it protects your pumps, and it protects the reliability of the pump station. Because you can probably pass it through this pump station without a problem. The key is ultimately to get it out of the system. And as John said, that happens at the treatment plant, but you don't want it to clog. But a muffin monster protects our pumps, because this pump station does pump to other pump stations. So it's not that this just goes by gravity out of our system.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion? We'll take it to the public. Any public comment, Monica?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing no further comment. Will I ask the question? All those in favor of rejecting the Stackhouse pump station bid, mechanicals, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Ebert.
The next screen, please. This is the electrical. And this price was clearly much closer, but the range of bids was 140,000 to 244,000. The budget was 115,000 out of the 592. A lot of bids, and the low bid was 140, but unfortunately, because of the overage on the mechanical, this was also in there, and the bids were slightly higher, because while most of the equipment was purchased by the vendor for the mechanical, there were certain ancillary things that were part of that overall package, which we're going to break up. There is a little bit of value engineering that we can do on this one, but quite honestly, we need to have a very quiet generator. There's a lot of things that we need to have in there. And depending on whether we include the muffin monster in the rebid or not, we'll eliminate. If we eliminate the muffin monster, I can clearly come down to that 115. That should not be a problem. The other thing that I'm going to recommend at the end is that we give the option for someone to bid all three. The coordination on these, and then the amount of times they have to mobilize and demobilize and just deal with other contractors, is when I talk to all of the vendors or all of the contractors, they said on a job that's this small and has this many components, the coordination is something that we place a very high risk value on. So the recommendation of Ebert Engineering and the Sewer Authority is to reject and rebid it with a revised design.
With that, I would like to entertain a motion to reject the bid for the electricals for the Stackhouse pump station.
So moved.
Ms.
I'll
Bundy,
second it.
Mr. McCarthy. I'm sorry. Raise your hand.
Suzanne made the motion, I seconded.
Mr. Grenier makes the second. Any further questions or discussion from the board? Hearing none, we'll take it to the public. Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, I'll ask the question. All those in favor of rejecting this bid, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Ebert.
Next screen, please. And this bid basically, this is one of the primary reasons that we're looking at combining all three contracts. Everyone was concerned that most of the people were afraid to bid on it because it was so small, and the fact that they had to mobilize so many times, that the mechanical contractors were the ones who recommended that they would like to actually incorporate this as well as the electrical in, because of my concern about bringing all the bids down to within our budget. So we only received 2 bids on this job. And one person rolled the dice and they came in second on the mechanical that they would get this. So the recommendation really is to rebid this one that allows all three contracts to be coordinated. We will also reach out to smaller local contractors to see if they will be willing. But the concern with the smaller contractors is just our bid requirements, all of our extra contractual requirements. It was just too much overhead, and they felt that a big boy would come in, so they chose not to bid. So our Ebert Engineering's recommendation and the recommendation of Sewer Authority is to reject and rebid. There's really no revisions to this contract other than to incorporate an option for all 3 contracts to be bid at a basically a deduct if they're awarded all 3 contracts.
So I'll entertain such a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Makes a motion to reject. Second by Mr. Lewis. Any questions or comments from the board? Mr. Brennan?
Please. Yeah, Mr. Ebert, with these, it sounds like they're quick turnaround, but I just want to make sure with the ones that we're rejecting, how much redesign work? I'm more interested in your schedule in terms of how quickly can you turn around and redesign and rebid?
My hope would be to have it out either the end of next week or the beginning of the following week and only have a 3-week bid, because basically all we're doing is we are opening up and putting, naming other alternatives in there. Any other value engineering that we can get from talking to the contractors that they said, we will poll some of the contractors and ask them what it would take to reduce their costs down, because coordination's a lot, the vendors are a lot, but there's still a significant number, of costs I need to get down in there. Now, if the board wishes to increase the budget and keep the Muffin Monster in there, that makes it easier, because that was I was going to have to cut out on that really to do the savings. That would have enabled me to have a smaller building and some other things which would have brought it in, but it's up to the board to include it. I would probably recommend it as an engineer, but for budgetary reasons, it's acceptably the other way. But my goal would be to have it out. I would say I'm back in the office on Friday. We have already started major redesign on it, just eliminating things. It's going to depend on the turnaround time of my electrical engineer, but he's all queued up and ready for this. But I told him I wouldn't give him direction until tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So I would say early, not next week, early the following week, we would have it.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'd be trying to hit your second meeting in September if possible. If not, it'd be your first in October.
And that would be a presentation for us to vote to bid it based on your revised design?
No, I wasn't going to do that because of the timeline. I could have it ready for your first meeting in September for a recommendation to go over that. I could do that for your first meeting in September. That would delay my overall award of the job by the 2 weeks. Because I'm going to be, we would be ready, early right before your board meeting. So I don't think we'd be that much of a delay to actually go in front of you and go over that and review what was revised, what was taken out, so that you guys can make an informed decision and you weren't doing it in the dark. I wasn't thinking that way because I was thinking about how do I get this back on the street as fast as I can. But that's really not a significant delay. I don't believe. I don't know off the top of my head what your first meeting is in September. When's your first meeting in September?
I think it's the second. It's very early in the month.
So that would absolutely not be a problem.
Okay.
In all honesty, I'd be just getting ready to put it out in the bid that day anyway. It might be Monday or Tuesday, so it's only a 2 or 3 day delay. I would not have that. That's a good idea. I would think it would be good to review it with the board. That way you understood it, and I could come back to you with a better budget if we include the Muffin Monster, because it does ripple a little bit into the electrical costs. I'm used to a single contract for the replacement of that, but it's not going to be that far. But whether it's the 50 or the 75,000 is what I would want to refine to you, so that you knew what money you were transferring in the budget if you so chose.
Okay, and then moving ahead, how long do you have to bid it out for?
3 weeks, because this has already been out there, and everybody's seen it, and I had 10 bidders on it. And what I would do is I would specifically highlight in the scope of work what changed from the previous bid.
Yeah.
So they would know exactly what it was and wouldn't have to go through by scratch.
Okay, so we'd be looking to award in October based off of that?
Yes.
Maybe our first October meeting?
Yes, your first October.
And then they could start right after that?
No, well, no, they can't start right after that.
Okay.
They can start shop drawings right after that. But due to COVID, you have a delay period on they stopped manufacturing a lot of the pumps. So there's a delay and a backup. That also, I could not quantify and tell you that was a reason that this went high. The reason I say that was the same pump manufacturer bid was selected in the Brookstone, which came right in on budget and did not have any delays. So, I've heard that in many other jobs. I did not get that direct feedback on this job. So, but until what everyone is saying is that, we'll give you a wide range estimate when we produce shop drawings, but we're not giving out any estimates today, because we don't know what orders are going to come in. Once a shop drawing is put out, they actually reserve that pump for you or place you in line. So while they won't give you a definitive until they have received approved shop drawings, they will confirm as part of that shop drawing that we have this pump and this is our delivery time.
What do you estimate for install for construction, like December, January?
Yeah, and then it's going to be the job will have to be finished up honestly in March and April because of the rehabilitation of the person's yard in the back there. So we'll get it grassed up or matted up. But after middle of October, I never can guarantee that I can stabilize. I can stabilize, but I can't grow grass.
I got you. Cool. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Ebert? Hearing none, we'll take it to public comment. Monica, is there any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing no further comment, we'll call the question. All those in favor of rejecting this bid, signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Ebert.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, so another, I think he went off because I think.
Oh, I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. So the question then, Fred, is going to be, if we bring him back to the September 2nd meeting to present, there's not a need to vote on F or E to rebid those projects at this point.
Right, but I think the consensus of the board is to leave the Muffin Monster in.
But again,
I'm not
the
sure
board
about
is.
that.
The board decision is going to be if he comes back on September 2nd to present some more specific numbers on inclusion of that, because that would trickle down into the other contract that you all would have better sense. So at least
add that to the equation. That's from what I was hearing.
Yeah. I mean, I think he'll be able to give you a clear sense that when you make a decision, you'll see what the numbers, could more precisely be. And then you could run that up to include it or not, but he could prep that stuff with that in there, I would presume, and then the option without it in there, which is, I don't think that.
So we will have Mr. Ebert come back on the 2nd to discuss items F and G.
Does that sound okay, Fred?
Absolutely. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ebert.
All right, thank you, guys. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to item number 9, the engineer's report. Mr. Backel.
Yes, supervisors, you have in your packet my engineer's report. I have a lot of agenda items here, so unless there's questions on specific items within my report, I would like to just go right into the agenda items.
I have one question.
Yes.
Thanks, Andy. You have in the report your update about the Scammell development and the work that's being done there. I don't know if you've heard anything back, and I don't know if you've heard anything from the residents. So if you could just.
Sure. So I have not heard anything from the residents. I've reached out to the developer several times. They got back to me late last week indicating that the plan that they have for the rain garden remediation, which is installing a seepage bed underneath, was submitted to DEP and the Conservation District and approved by the Conservation District. And they are now bidding that work out to several contractors to determine who's going to come in and bid it. So I reached back out to them to say, what's a realistic timeline for when can we get this constructed? And also, how does that impact the other punch list items that are required within the development? And they haven't gotten back to me yet as far as when they expect actual construction on site. So I'm waiting to hear back from them on that.
Thank you.
My biggest concern is, the planting season, getting grass to grow, as Mr. Ebert just said. It's going to take them a couple of weeks to construct it. So there's still time to get it constructed and get it done within the planting season. But time is ticking away.
I was going to ask the same question, so thank you, Ms. Blundy. When do you expect construction to kick off for that one?
It's really dependent on when the developer gets their bids back, awards it, and then I'm going to want to see shop drawings for the materials that they're going to provide. So I think a realistic time frame would be starting middle of September, third week in September.
Yeah, so and then they'd get. When do you think they'd be done? No, it's not a huge rain garden.
It won't take more than a week to complete the work.
Okay, so to that end, they'd be an optimal fall planting season if they're starting early October for plantings.
Yes. Now that's for the rain garden in the cul-de-sac, and then they still have to dress up some of the roadside swales along there, and also address some items down at the rain garden at the bottom of the hill. So they indicated that they're not doing that until they finish the rain garden, because they don't want cars driving off the edge and ruining the roadside swales. So I don't think that it's going to happen concurrently. So but all told, the whole work I think would take 2 weeks, and so it's still within the optimum planting season.
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so the first agenda, I'm sorry if anybody else had anything. I'll just proceed. The first agenda item is to consider the approval of the traffic control plan for the reconstruction of Dobry Road. If you'll remember, a couple weeks ago, or a couple meetings ago, we submitted a concept plan that the developer provided to us for rerouting traffic along Dobry Road from the 6 properties that are further west of the Caddis development. That traffic would be routed through the site, through the Caddis site, and out onto Oxford Valley Road through the constructed driveway of the Caddis development. They have come back with a revised concept plan showing a little bit more detail. They have also submitted that to PennDOT. So any type, I believe you have within your packet the concept plan, or the additional revised plan that they have submitted, which shows barricades and detours along Dobry Road at either end of the work site, and then a fence along the driveway in the Caddis development that has a black mesh screen hanging on either side for light and noise attenuation. And then also additional signage on Oxford Valley Road, which would notify vehicles that they can make a left turn in or a left turn out. So basically, this would permit they would not install the quote unquote pork chop within the driveway that is going to permit the left turning movements in the permanent condition. So in this temporary condition, which would be about 2 weeks, the driveway would permit left turning and right turning vehicles entering and exiting that driveway. So like I said, they still have to get PennDOT to sign off on it, since Oxford Valley Road is state road. but I wanted to put this to the board to get your consideration for approval, contingent upon meeting the requirements for PennDOT.
Andy, just a quick question. We resolved some of the lighting issues that folks had across the tree area for the folks in Regency?
Yeah, so there's two factors that we've looked at there. The contractor had completed a light level study at the property line and submitted photographs and submitted a conceptual plan of where those measurements were taken, and it did show 0 foot candles at the property line. But in addition to that, they are planting 35 green giant arborvitae that basically, when the contractor was removing, completing some work along the property line shared with the Regency development, they overstepped their bounds and removed some trees that were existing. And as a result, they opened up an area that they need to remediate. So they came back with a planting plan of 35 green giant arborvitaes, about approximately 7 feet tall. I was told that they were being installed today. When they were installing them, they installed them a little too far down the hill from where the approved plan shows them. So I reached out to the contractor and identified that, and so they're going to have to move them up closer to the top of the hill, which would provide a better screen for that.
And one last thing before I let you go. Last time we talked about this, there was some concern about trash trucks from McCullough. And my understanding is they no longer stage from Dobry Road. So that concern is no longer operative.
That's correct. And even if they did, a fully loaded trash truck is approximately 80,000 pounds, as I believe that was confirmed by the contractor in their conversation with McCullough, and Mr. Abrams had indicated to us in that meeting. But they believe that loading of a vehicle could pass over the storm water management system. And so that would not be a concern of theirs. Even if there was an accidental, fully loaded trash truck going in that area, they believe it can handle.
Let's entertain a motion before. Do we need a motion for this, Mr. Trullo? Okay, well, let's have a motion for consideration of the traffic control plan for Dobry Road.
I move that we approve the traffic control plan for the reconstruction of Dobry Road as outlined by our township engineer.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Bundy. Now we can go ahead with the questions and comments for Mr. Pope from the board. Mr. Grenier.
Yeah, Mr. Trullo, this would be for you because Mr. Pokel made one important comment in there. I just want to make sure it's included in the motion. And if we have to amend, I'll make the request. I believe it would be contingent upon PennDOT's approval. So
That makes sense. That probably is wise to include that in there.
Can I revise my motion to make it approval of the traffic control plan for the reconstruction of Dobry Road contingent on PennDOT's approval? And then the seconder would have to agree as well.
Of course. Agreed.
All right. So
thank you for that. I just want to make sure. Sorry.
Go ahead, Go ahead.
Sorry. And then with respect to the green giant arborvitae, what property were they planted on? Are they planted on a Regency property? Are they planted on
The trees that were removed were on the Regency property. We instructed them to plant them on replant the green giant arborvitae on the Regency property as close to the top of the hill, but not go into a level area where you would get trees planted in somebody's backyard. So it was part of the Regency property. The existing trees were part of the Regency property. This is basically replacing those trees that were removed on the Regency property.
Okay.
This also provides for additional landscaping and screening within the Caddis property that were on the landscape plan.
Yeah, and same species. So you're replacing in kind the same species. You're not replacing.
No, it's
something
not.
else.
It's not necessarily in kind. It wasn't there's no way to tell what exactly the species were that were removed. But
They weren't arborvitae.
yeah, right. So, when they submitted a planting plan, they proposed the green giant arborvitae. I took that to the Regency Homeowners Association, and I took it to the property owner that is closest to that area, and both of them approved that species.
Was that area included in the Regency's buffer, their landscaping plan, or were those trees that were already growing there that were never touched during?
Yeah, those were mature trees that were already there. It was not part of the proposed Regency buffer.
Okay, I just want to make sure that EAC doesn't have to sign off on it, and there's no requirements specific to species and densities and sizes and all that stuff related to buffer requirements. Green giants grow really fast,
Yes.
and they're straight up, so they won't grow into someone's yard. So it's interesting. It's good screening.
Well, Dan,
And then,
can I just follow up on that? Because I'm really concerned that they accidentally traversed onto other property, removed trees that, obviously weren't planted yesterday, and now have replaced them with just what it sounds like they were supposed to do all along. That doesn't seem sufficient.
No, they weren't supposed to replace them, or they weren't supposed to do that all along.
No, but you said they were going to plant arborvitae, like that was part of the original plan, that they were going to buffer that area with.
No,
I want them to make up for what they did.
there's additional landscape buffering that is assorted species that was required to be planted on the Caddis development. They're still going to do that in addition to the green giant arborvitae that they're planting on the Regency property.
yeah, Suzanne, I think another way to address it, I think, is when we look at what was removed from Regency. If that was a land development plan and they removed some number of trees of some size, our tree replacement regulation would have our algorithm, whatever it would be, would spit out some number of trees that need to be replaced of certain size. When we do a side by side of what that would be versus planting the 35 arborvitaes, was that comparison done to see if they actually? And I think that's. Forgive me if I misspeak, Suzanne, but I think that's where you're going, right? Is that equitable when we do that?
You're muted, Kurt.
Just so you know, Mr. Majewski, who watches all of these meetings, I don't know whether that's a good sign or a troubling one, but he had texted me that what was removed was primarily underbrush and smaller trees in poor condition, was essentially his assessment.
So having said that, the fact that they're planting 35 evergreen trees, I think that would be an equivalent or exceed the equivalent of what they removed.
Yeah, my only concern with arborvitaes, when you plant that many of a single species, they're fast growing and they're for screening. They're evergreen top to bottom kind of trees. They don't lose their leaves down towards the bottom.
Yes, they do. 'Cause the deer eat them.
I have a fence around mine, so I guess that's true. But they don't provide nearly as good habitat as trees that may have been there or whatever vegetation was there. So I wish they would have looked at planting some different mix, higher quality, et cetera, versus just arborvitaes.
I think the goal was to maximize the screening effect, and that was that was what was expressed to us as being most important, was a visual obstruction.
By the Regency folks, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Not to, that's a bit of a tangent. I apologize, but I think I was reading Suzanne's mind there.
Any other discussion or questions about, we are on the traffic control plan, right? Okay, so is there any more comments or questions about the traffic control plan? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Is there any public comment, Monica?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing no further comment. All those in favor of approving the traffic control plan for the reconstruction of Doby Road with the contingency of PennDOT's approval, signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Andy.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to consider authorization to proceed with the application for a multimodal transportation fund grant for the construction of ADA ramps throughout the township. A multimodal transportation fund grant is a grant issued by DCED. It was announced earlier this year that there is no match required for this grant funding. The application deadline is the end of September. And in talking with township staff, we believe that an appropriate project would be addressing ADA ramps that we would normally replace in the road program. But because it's concrete and this is separate than, asphalt, in the past, we've had road programs and we've incorporated ADA ramps into these road programs because that's a requirement of PennDOT. But in order to do that, we've generally had contractors who are asphalt contractors bid on the road program and then sub the ADA ramps out to a concrete contractor and then mark up the work. So the township's paying a 15% surcharge to complete ADA ramps. And so there was the thinking that, well, why don't we look at the roads that are on the next 3 years of the road program, or, well, the next 2 years, because there's, we had a 3-year road paving program last year, and this year was already been addressed. But so we looked at the road paving program for next 2 years and included the ADA ramps from those. And then any list that, any other roads that the Public Works Director had in mind for the out year 2023, we included them as well. And so we have just a general cost estimate, which I included in your packet there, of including a 10% contingency, which we've included. Is our estimate's $266,000. Under the grant requirements, we're allowed to add 2% administration, 15% engineering, for a total grant request of $307,615. So we're asking for authorization to proceed for a grant application in that amount.
I'll entertain such a motion. You're mute, Mr. Lewis.
I'll make a motion that we apply for a multimodal transportation fund grant for the construction of ADA ramps throughout the township.
Second.
Mr. McCartney makes the second. Any discussion from the board? Ms. Ferguson, unmute yourself.
Just want to thank you, Andy. I want to point out to the board as well, we've had this discussion that what we're looking at doing to try to get the most out of every dollar that we can pave with is getting a year ahead, like Andy talked about, with ADA ramps, but also with inlet repairs and things that we like that we could do in-house, where we would actually be doing inlet repairs in a given year. That would be for the next year's road program. So in the end, if we wouldn't have to include those items in those bids, we'd have a capability of putting more money directly into the roads instead of these other areas that can eat up some of that money. So I think it's helpful. It also allows us to be forward thinking about roads and that work a year in advance.
Thank you, Kirk. Any other comments or questions from the board? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Any public comment, Monica?
No public comment.
Thank you. Hearing no further comment. All those in favor of authorization to proceed with the grant, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
0. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Vogel.
Okay, thank you. So the next item would be very similar to that. Consider authorization to proceed with an application for a multimodal transportation fund grant for the construction of the Woodside Road bike path. If you'll remember, we already received a grant for $52,500, and that was intended for the land acquisition costs and design and putting together a bid package and putting it out for bid for the construction of the Woodside Road bike path. This type of multimodal transportation fund grant would cover bike paths, shared use paths. And so we believe this project would qualify for that. And we believe that it's in the township's best interest to put in an application for that. I will say that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this amount, but I believe we have a budget of $120,000 sitting there for the construction of the bike path, and that could be offered as a match, even though there's no match required. That could be offered as a match to kind of sweeten the deal, so to speak, for anybody reviewing this grant application.
That was part of the 0.24 mils that was instituted a couple of years ago with the idea that that would be utilized, and it's still sitting. We took that money and we moved it into a capital reserve fund and recreation that was earmarked that way. So as Andy said, we applied for this before and offered a match up and felt good about it and were denied. We know every municipality in the world is going to be going for money when there's no much. That this is what this was intended for at the time. It's sitting there to be used. And if the board would be so inclined, I think we'd need direction. Andy would need direction of the board's desire to apply that money to this project to offer up a match to increase our chances for success on the bike path.
All right, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'm just going to point out that as I have recused myself on this issue in the past, I will continue with that.
Okay. Ms. Bundy will recuse herself. So who would like to consider authorization to proceed with a multimodal grant application specifically for the Woodside Bike Path project?
I'll make a motion to proceed with the application of a multimodal transportation fund grant for the construction of the Woodside Road bike path.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Mr. McCarty makes a second. Any questions or further comments? Mr. Ferguson.
I'm just going to ask for clarification, whether or not if you want to frame that motion or make or give direction or have a consensus on the matter that I just brought up with that application.
Do we consider the $125,000 in the capital reserve fund as a possible match to make the grant more palatable to the was it the DEV?
Kurt, you said it was already earmarked for that, correct?
Say again.
You said that it was already earmarked for that?
Well, at the time, so let me be clear. At the time, we had 0.24 mils that was to go for recreation projects of whatever sort. For the year that we had that was what the intent at the time was. So if you were to ask me my opinion, you could use it for anything you wanted. However, for the year that we had that was the intent. So that is at the discretion of the board, but that was clearly the intent at the time to use that money as a match for this project.
Are there any members of the board that were part of that board that would see a reason to change that at this point?
Except for you, everybody was a member of the board that did that.
Correct. And I guess Suzanne's recusing herself, so that would be a question for you, John and Dan.
Correct.
So yeah, no, there's no reason why we shouldn't consider using that to help improve our grant chances. We're actually contractually obligated as part of our arrangement with the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission when we sold the park and ride to them. So we have to build a bike path eventually. And if we can do it sooner and use the money we've allocated, that would certainly help.
Mr. Grenier, do you have any objections? He's not here.
Do you have any feedback on it, Fred?
Well, on this, I agree with Mr. Lewis. However, it would have to be unanimous if Mr. Grenier is not here to vote. So,
let me say this though, if I could. James is not exempt from considering this just because he wasn't on the board.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
No, but
This is still a decision of the board, but
it would have to be a 3-0 vote.
Yeah, I just
yes.
needed.
No, that's true.
So,
That's
it's only
correct.
3, yes.
Yeah, I just needed a little history on it and see if there was any reason why it would be changed. I mean, I second.
No, there's no reason to change. No reason to change.
Okay.
So, we're going to amend the motion. I'll entertain an amendment to add the $125,000 to the
Application.
Yeah,
application.
I'll revise the motion to authorize the township staff to proceed with the application of a multimodal transportation fund grant for the construction of the Woodside Road bike path and use funds that have been previously allocated toward that in an effort to secure, to use a match to secure the grant.
I will still second that.
Very good. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll go to the public. Any public comment, Monica?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment. All those in favor of applying for the grant signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 3-0. That's good. Thank you.
Hello.
One abstention. I'm sorry.
301, yes.
Thank you.
301. Go ahead, Mr. Vogel.
Yes, so the next item on the agenda is consider change orders number 1 and number 2 for the 2020 Bike Path Maintenance Program project. I think we'll do these change orders separately. The first change order, if you'll remember, was for the area north of Covington Road. This was an estimated, I gave an estimated amount a couple of, I guess, back in June. At the meeting in June concerning the change order and was authorized to proceed. This is a final amount based on the quantity that was placed in that area. So we are recommending a change order in the amount of $5,017.40.
30 cents, you said?
40 cents.
I'd like to make that motion. I'll just make it simple.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to for change order 1. Any comments, questions from the board?
I texted Dan. Hopefully he's okay. So I'm just, because,
I think I heard little girls in the background, so he may.
okay, that would be good news. Okay.
Hearing no further public comment from the board, we'll open up the public comment. Monica, is there any comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, call the question. All those in favor, change order 1, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 4-0. Okay, Mr. Vogel, we'll go with the number 2.
Yeah, let's roll into change order number 2 then on that same project. This is for the area south of Oxford Valley Road and Heacock Road. This was for addressing repairs that were safety concerns in that area along the bike path. And if you'll remember, we also approved this for an amount not to exceed $4,000. As it turns out, in my opinion, the scope of work was significant. The quantities show that the tonnage of asphalt that they placed down if going by their bid line item, would have exceeded that $4,000. But they, in discussion with me, they agreed that to do the change order and do the work for the lump sum amount of $4,000.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. McCartney.
The only other thing that I would say is that there is, I believe I received an email from David Truelove's office about the ownership of that area, and that was indeed an area that is owned by, I guess, the development, that it was never deeded over to the township, and thus the board would have to give me authorization to seek reimbursement on that.
Those would be two separate motions, I think, for that purpose. Authorize the
Yes.
change order, then secondly, and authorize the engineer to seek reimbursement from the development for those costs.
Dave, has the development been notified?
I think that would have been my partner, Barbara Kirk. I don't know that they have been, but we can certainly do that. If you want to wait till the next meeting so we can do that, it's up to you.
Yeah, and these,
Yeah,
I mean, I have no experience in these type of cases. Do we usually have get a reimbursement when this happens? Or is this the first time this happened?
To my knowledge, this is the first time under my watch.
I'm not familiar with it. It's not been common in my experience, but
You know, until I had even though it's not a large amount of money, I would just, to keep things clean in the future, I would probably get something from the development before I would vote on authorizing this bid.
The change order, you mean?
The change order, I'm sorry.
Well, so, okay, understood.
But is there a risk that it will cost us more if we wait on this because we're in process and the folks are on site, or no?
No, so this is similar to the other change order. This is work that we had provided an estimate of the work, and we were given authorization to proceed previously. So this is just an amount based on the quantities that were out in the field. And so when in negotiating with the contractor, after the work is already done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Would the board, is there a consensus from the board just to wait until the
Yes.
next meeting to get this information?
Yes,
We'll postpone it?
yes.
you want to table the motion at this
Yes, can I have a motion to table or postpone till September the 2nd?
So moved.
Second,
We have a motion. Any discussion on the postponement?
There's just no discussion of the motion to table. I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. Other than the time frame, yeah. Hearing no discussion on the time, all those in favor of postponing until September 2nd, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
aye.
Aye.
4-0, thank you. Meeting, that change order will be reconsidered on September 2nd. All right, Andy.
Okay, so then the next item would be the payment certificate, which was a payment certificate for that project in full. And so I think that given that the change order number 2 was not approved, that it's appropriate to also table or postpone any type of vote on the payment certificate for the project.
We could just all have a consensus to agree to move that item to the next meeting agenda. Since there's no motion on the table, or motion before the board, there's nothing to table or defer at this time.
So without an objection, we will postpone that till September 2nd. Thank you. Go ahead, Andy. Item F.
Next item would be the change order number 3. This would be consider approval of change order number 3 for the 2020 Liquid Fuels Road Program. This is a change order that adjusts the final amount based on the quantities that were actually placed in the field. And so it is a net credit to the township in the amount of $52,643.58.
Do I hear a motion to consider?
So is the motion then for the change order so that we receive the net credit of $52,643.58?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Second, Ms. McCartney. Ms. Bundy made the motion. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll take it to the public. Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
4-0. Okay, next one, Mr. Vogel.
The next one is the consider pay application number 2 for the 2020 Liquid Fuels Road Program. I'm actually pulling that off of the agenda because the contractor had not provided me with the required maintenance bond. In time, they indicated they would get it to me, but they have not submitted that. We've also reviewed some concerns that we've had along Rose Hollow Drive, and saw some ponding over there. And so we're reaching out to the contractor to have them remediate that. So we've pulled the final payment application, and that will most likely be on the next board meeting as well, contingent upon them getting us the maintenance bond and also completing the remediation work on Rose Hollow.
Andy, how much would that pay application have been for?
I don't have the exact amount in front of me. It would have been 45,000 and change.
Oh, I was checking. I thought it was 40 to 50. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the MS4 program.
Yeah. So the next item is the presentation on the MS4 program, and so I'm going to share my screen here and bring up the presentation. And with me tonight, I have a very special guest. She is Elizabeth Coletti with my office. She has been the one who has primarily been involved with contact and coordination with DEP on the status of our MS4 permit and the pollution reduction plan. And she is also involved with coordinating with Yardley Borough, as Yardley has received a grant to study the watershed of Buck Creek. And so she has had some coordination with them. So, and she's generally an expert in all matters of stormwater management program and permitting. So I felt it appropriate to bring her in here, and she can slap my wrist and correct me when I make a mistake on any presentation items here.
Thank you for that introduction, Andy.
Elizabeth.
Hello.
So this is just a general overview of the MS4 program, stormwater management program for Lower Makefield Township. What is MS4? Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. That's what the MS4 stands for. And it basically includes all of the stormwater conveyance from impervious areas owned by the township, or which would include roads and sidewalks, and the way that is conveyed to the streams. So that could be everything from the gutter line and curb line along the road, to the inlets, to the pipes, to the outfalls, to the basins. That's all included in the municipal separate storm sewer system, and therefore DEP issues to the township a permit for that MS4 system, so that we're allowed to discharge to waters of the Commonwealth as they're designated. And that's what our permit is for. There's a whole history of the Pennsylvania General Permit, which oversees both the NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System General Permit, for the MS4. I'm not going to read through every one of these. But it kind of gives you a history that it dates back to 1990. Some significant changes were made in 2013, where it creates requirements on the municipality to implement minimum control measures. And we'll get into what those are and how we're meeting those requirements a little later. And then in the federal EPA released new requirements in 2016. Pennsylvania implemented them in 2018 as part of their permit requirements for a pollution reduction plan, PRP. TMDL, which is a total maximum daily load, which that is worse than a PRP. That we haven't reached that level yet where our streams are impaired so much that they're requiring us to put a limit on how much pollutants we're contributing to it. We just have to reduce our sediment loads by 10%. That's what the pollution reduction plan is. If the pollution reduction plan fails to control pollutants to the stream, then that's when a TMDL is issued, and the restrictions get more severe. And then PCMs are pollution control measures. That just identifies different pollutants other than the pollution reduction plan is for sediment and total phosphorus and total nitrogen or nitrates. PCMs are other pollutants that require regulation. So the permit requirements, here's the list of minimum control measures. And so within the MS4 permit, we're required to meet these 6 minimum control measures, also the pollution reduction plan and the pollution control measures. So as you see there, they were, that goes back to the history of when those requirements were implemented upon the township from the state. This kind of gives you a little bit more information on the permit schedule from PADEP. So the minimum control measure, public education and outreach, that's updated annually and included in our annual report, where we distribute 2 types of materials annually to the public. These are mostly flyers or information that we have within the township building, but also up on the website, and also annual presentations that we give, such as this one tonight. We also gave another one earlier, and I'll get into that. We must conduct the public, this would be public involvement. We must conduct at least 1 public meeting dedicated to the MS4 program by 2023. We're doing that tonight. Illicit discharge detection and elimination is part of minimum control measure number 3. Again, that's a program where you have to have a map of the entire MS4 system, and it's updated and maintained annually. That's been required. We are working to, I guess the requirement for to have the system mapped was since 2013, but DEP has since put in regulations on what is shown on that map, and it's been more robust since 2013, and we're working with DEP to complete that mapping. That's still an item that's in progress. Also, dry weather inspection of all outfalls. So where our storm sewer pipes discharge to the stream is considered an outfall. And we need to inspect that, each one of those outfalls during dry weather time, and get water quality data on that at least once by 2023. And then a stormwater management ordinance, which must be consistent with the DEP model ordinance, needs to be implemented by September 30th, 2022. Minimum control measure number 4 is annual reports We've been submitting annual reports. Included in those annual reports are any violations that we've witnessed or come across through our inspections, whether it be of construction projects or of basins or other. Minimum control measure number 5 is a full inventory of the post-construction stormwater management BMPs and operation and maintenance activities. That was required starting in 2018. What we've done is all new developments since then, we've required an operation and maintenance plan. They've been submitted to both the township and the building and planning department and us. So we've been tracking that from 2018. And we're working on completing the list of other BMPs that were installed prior to 2018. And then an operation and maintenance plan updated annually starting in 2018. So you can see all of those items were included in our last MS4 annual report to DEP in 2019. The pollution reduction plan was due in 2017, September of 2017. It was submitted by the previous township engineer. The DEP took a while to review that. Liz, I don't know if you remember when DEP finally got back to us on the review of that previously submitted plan.
Yeah, it was shortly after I started with RVE. So it was probably around July of 2018.
Okay.
And then we had an in-person meeting with them that September where we sat down with them and they very plainly said that it was not adequate at all and that our mapping was below par of what they were anticipating. And so we sat down with them and figured out a schedule moving forward about how to get that up to their standards that they were looking for.
Okay, thank you. And do you want to just go right into pollution control measures as well?
Yeah, sure. So that's a newer one. Basically, until you have your approved PRP plan and your updated permit, the PCMs weren't actually activated, I guess is a way to put it. But they are now on their own timeline, and they refer to them as Appendix A, B, and C, and they deal with metals, PCBs, pathogens, things like E. coli, all that sort of stuff. And it depends on your individual waterways what you are subject to. So Lower Makefield does have an Appendix B requirement. And so as part of that, if that was outside of a sewer shed that was already part of your PRP, you now have to delineate those sewer sheds and you have to create a source inventory of what could potentially be contributing to that particular pollutant. So that is a new thing that is due with this year's annual reports. And a lot of people are really far behind on that because DEP hasn't actually provided any kind of direction about what that source inventory should be. So we are very much trying to utilize the efforts that Yardley Borough is going through as part of the Buck Creek Watershed Visual Assessment, which will take note of all types of potential sources for pollutant and trying to append that to our efforts in Lower Makefield that have to occur outside of just Buck Creek Watershed. And then once you have that list, you'll have to go through a process of investigating all of those potential sources and, figuring out what their current protocols are for dealing with their runoff and whether or not they're following proper procedure. And then adding that to your annual report, explaining if, you found that they were participating in the pollutant, that they figured out a way to stop doing that, or have some sort of a measuring going on so that progress can be made as they figure out a way to limit it and stop it. At the same time, the animal waste ordinance came into effect. And if you don't already have that explicitly laid out in your existing stormwater ordinance, they expect you to develop a completely separate one, and that has to be in place by 2022. And then everything has to kind of be wrapped up at the end of the 5-year of your PRP to show that you have met your pollution reduction requirements. So,
So that, initially it was due in 2023, but because I think an overall theme here is that DEP has been the bottleneck. They have taken a while to review all of basically every municipality's submission of their pollution reduction plan. I believe that when we spoke with DEP District 6 in Norristown, they had about 215 pollution reduction plans that they had to review. And they anticipated that it would take approximately 2 weeks to review all of those. That was back in 2018. So I'm not sure where they are with that, but you can see that that's a pretty long time frame for them to review and comment on pollution reduction plans. So the fact that we're reaching out to them, we're meeting with them, we're involved in discussions with them, keeps us in compliance, even though we're a little bit behind where some other municipalities are as far as a completed pollution reduction plan. And that doesn't, because DEP says that, we have to implement the improvements by 5 years after the plan is approved, it doesn't have an impact on them.
correct. Yep.
So as you can see, we're in progress on all of those. Minimum control measure number 1, public education and outreach. I reviewed previously how we're meeting that goal. We submitted we've got educational pamphlets, information on the township website. We also completed a annual stormwater presentation on May 19th. That's some of the literature that we have available for the public. And so that's how we're maintaining compliance. And all of this information gets included. DEP wants copies of this stuff included in our annual report to them for our MS4 permit. Public involvement and participation. How do we comply? Township environment. We have the township EAC. We have the public review stormwater ordinances or any changes to that, and also the public review of land development applications as well through the Planning Commission and both the Board of Supervisors meetings. So the transparency there is actually a requirement by our MS4 permit, and we're meeting that goal. Illicit discharge and detection. How we're meeting that requirement. We're upgrading the storm sewer map in the township GIS. This year we completed basin inspections on 40 some basins throughout the township. And we also have ordinances in our stormwater management ordinance that prohibits illicit discharge. And so you can see that's a copy of an old map, and that's some pictures that of stuff we're trying to avoid in this. If anybody sees anything like that on the lower 2, I encourage you to call us immediately, contact the township immediately that they've noticed an illicit discharge. Minimum control measure number 4 is construction site runoff control, and how we're complying with that is any permit that is submitted where it shows an earth disturbance of more than 2,000 square feet. That requires a review by the Bucks County Conservation District for erosion and sediment control measures. We complete routine construction inspections to check on those erosion and sediment control measures, make sure that they're being properly maintained and they're implemented as per the plan. And we issue occasionally, not very often, but occasionally we issue notices of ENS violations, and copies of those ENS violations get included in our annual report. For post-construction stormwater management, any additional impervious areas, as per our stormwater management ordinance, we need stormwater mitigation, whether it be volume control for improving water quality or flooding control for reducing the amount of flow that gets to our streams to control flooding in 100-year storms. It also requires an operation and maintenance agreement that for all new BMPs that are constructed. And again, that establishes personnel who are responsible for the maintenance of these stormwater management facilities, contact information, and outlines an annual inspection of those BMPs to ensure that they're being functioning properly. So this, you can see these are photos of some BMPs that are being implemented during construction that we observe and check. That's an infiltration trench on the top, and that below that is a large flood control stormwater management system that also has a water quality or constructed wetlands component to it below that. But the infiltration trench on top, we inspect those when they're shown on the plan and approved. We inspect those to make sure that they're the size that they are indicated on the plan and in accordance with the plan. Finally, pollution prevention for the minimum control measures. We work with Public Works to provide training for handling pollutants and containment should spills occur. And then also we conduct routine inspection and maintenance of township regional stormwater management BMPs. Make sure that there's no pollutants in that as well. You can see that's a picture of a salt storage shed and also spill containment equipment that the Township Public Works has within their facilities or within their garage. So the pollution reduction plan, it identifies the impaired watersheds. It maps the storm sewer within the impaired watersheds, and then it develops a plan to reduce the pollutants. And the requirements are a 10% reduction in sediment, 5% reduction in nitrogen, and 3% reduction in total phosphorus. Township compliance, we will be submitting the pollution reduction plan September of 2020. There's a list of the impaired watersheds for both the pollution reduction plan and the pollutant control measures. Like I said before, the BMPs should be implemented to reduce that pollutant load within 5 years of the approval by DEP for the plan. DEP has kind of already told us through informational sessions that the way to get the most bang for your buck is to either implement stream bank restoration projects or basin retrofits, which would work to meet the requirements of the pollution reduction plan. And so the township has over 30 basins in impaired areas for potential retrofit. What would be a basin retrofit? Well, that's basically taking a flood control basin and adding a water quality improvement to that basin. And whether that is adjusting the outlet structure, making sure that this detains more water and allows it to infiltrate into the ground, as opposed to just a flood control where it holds back the water, but then it meters it out slowly to the stream. This would hold it back and actually hold it on site and infiltrate it into the ground. Again, provide some plantings, rain garden pockets. This would all be part of a basin retrofit that could potentially work to help reduce the pollutant loads. Pollution control measures. Liz, you want to handle this?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, this speaks to Appendix A, B, and C that are part of the overall PAG 13 permit, and it deals with metals, pathogens, or priority organic compounds. And so Lower Makefield has to deal with Appendix B and Appendix C. And as those requirements, that has additional mapping, the source inventory, the investigation, and the overall report. So we are in the early phases of that. We're including that mapping with our ongoing mapping that's going on, and we will continue creating that source inventory and updating that as we progress.
So there you go. That's how the township's being in compliance, and we're collaborating with Yardley Borough's EAC to identify potential sources. And upcoming, we will be expanding the animal ordinance specifications for animal waste. And at that time, that's pretty much all I had. So if the board has any questions, public has any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Liz, for that very comprehensive report on our MS4. Are we on schedule to meet all the deadlines by 2023, 2024?
So what Andy was saying, though, because we don't have an approved PRP, our timeline is a little bit different than what is published by DEP. So they have this published schedule that was based off of the understanding that any existing permittee would have had an approved PRP starting in 2018, which is not the case for almost all of the municipalities. I can count on one hand how many people have an approved plan. So Lower Makefield is not alone in this process. So basically, it's either by 2023 or it's within 5 years after having an approved plan. So we're still trying our best to meet these milestones that they created with their, pie in the sky schedule when we can. But at this moment, since we don't have an approved PRP, we are not on the clock yet in all technicality.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Okay, that's all I had.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I could weigh in, I did hear from Mr. Grenier. He texted me about 20 minutes ago and advised that some of his symptoms had returned and he's now incapacitated from continuing on in this meeting. So as of 9:05, I believe the record should reflect that he exited the meeting.
I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully he gets better soon.
He did indicate some concerns about approving Heston Hall subdivision and Aaron Development's Dobie Run subdivision. Are those time sensitive?
I don't know what the extensions are for those. I have no idea.
Okay, let's.
You mean that he texted you or something, John?
Yeah. It was, I don't know what the time was.
Mr. Murphy is
8:54.
available. Mr. Murphy will be entering the room when those items come up if there's discussions about it.
That's for zoning hearing. Okay, well, when we get to that point, John, you can give Mr. Grenier's reservations.
Yeah, hopefully I don't know that I can do as well as he could on some of the technical elements of his concern. So
I understand. Well, unless he comes back on, then you'll do the best you can. Next item on the agenda is project updates. You have before you, of course, the list of projects that the township is in various parts of completion. Unless is there any questions or discussions on any of these project updates? Hearing none, we will go to the manager's report. Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll try to be efficient here. So in my report, I covered two items that have been, or two budgetary items that we have been discussing. If you'll recall in previous reports, I talked of a range of revenues that we've been tracking, most of which we're on track or actually doing better than. The two that have been of ongoing focus and concern are real estate transfer taxes, which we know can be volatile, but importantly, our property tax collection. So at the last meeting, if you'll recall, we talked about the face period of collection being extended through the end of July, that the board did extended it a month. So it was hard to give a apples to apples comparison for the collections between discount and face while we had that lag. So the number now that I had provided you, without going too far in the weeds, essentially shows that the number of households that have paid through both of those periods this year is marginally higher than it was last year, which is wonderful news. That's wonderful news that we are a couple of dozen households ahead of where we were last year. So what I had concluded in that report was, in an abundance of caution, that I'd be assuming a 96% rate of collection through the end of this year. Well, we're already there. So for now, and we'll continue to track this by month, I would change that projection to say that we would be, for now, we'll assume 97.5% at the end of the year. We budget for 98.5. Last year was even better than that. So that's all very positive news. On real estate transfer taxes, those have been probably the greatest area of concern because those numbers were trending much lower than they were last year. I was actually projecting about a $425,000 shortfall for this year. The good news is in July, we saw a collection that represented about 97% of what we collected for July in 2019, which is very good news. So I'm still making, so that 1 month, we'll see if that was the trend and we can adjust that, or if it ends up being at or around the 75% estimate that I had suggested would be the basis for a year-end projection. We had been trending at around 70 or so we had this good month. So at least for now, we'll keep it at 75, but that 1 month bump would lower the year-end projection or improve the year-end projection by about $30,000, $32,000. So we are tracking everything else. Permits are still doing very well. All of those other taxes and collections and fees are doing okay. And so for now, I would say I presented before that we'd have a year-end projection around 630,000 or so at the end of this year. For the time being, I would say that I think we could assume that would be in the $700,000 range. So instead of 5% at the end of the year, right now, I would say that 6% is where I would peg that number at right now, but we'll continue to track it. So that's all I have with that. The only other thing I'd point out is I did present to all of you sent to you the 2019 audited financial statements. And I'm currently coordinating with the auditors, and we'll defer to you, Dr. Weiss, as far as getting them on the agenda, that they would be available to come to either September meeting. And it's just a matter of, how the next agenda looks, and as far as packing that versus what the 16th looks like. But they would be at one of those two meetings, and I can talk to you about that. The review of the financials for the sewer, I want to remind the board two things. One, the financial audit that you get does encompass the sewage fund. So there are numbers in there. The sewage audit that we think of it, which looks at assets and things, and it looks a little different, has not been issued yet. We're still waiting on getting some detail back from a sewage authority member. That when we get that report will be issued. So hopefully that will be this week. And we'll certainly press for that to be done before they present on September 2nd. So that's all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Lewis, you want to make comments?
Yeah, where you expect to be at the end of the year based on where we're at on the sewer fund? So what's the positive, negative balance that we expect in the sewer fund at this time for the end of the year?
I don't have a number on that right now. The budgeted number that we had was for the year, something like $100,000 or so. So I'll have to look and see. I have not done a year-end run on that.
Okay.
So in the end, collections on sewers are still have still been healthy. This year, as if you'll recall, in March, I had waived all late fees for the year. So, there's a certain level of collection that we'd be bypassing by doing that. But I will have projections on that soon. I'm obviously working on the 2020 budget as we speak, and I'll be able to give you a number soon on that as I work through that to start giving, and even in meeting, casually like this, start talking about that number even before I have a budget. I just don't have it yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so next item on the agenda is our solicitor's report. Mr. Trillo.
Yes, an executive session started tonight around 6:35. It ended just before this meeting started. All board members are present, as well as Mr. Ferguson, and for a time outside counsel and myself. Items related to litigation, informational items, and real estate were discussed at the executive session. Next, under zoning inspections and planning are the two matters that Mr. Lewis referenced. And just in abundance of caution, not to say we should or shouldn't do it, I did text or emailed Mr. Majewski about the deadlines for both these projects, Heston Hall and Aaron Development, and I haven't heard back from him yet. So
I have.
Okay.
So Mr. Majewski's comment is that Aaron must be acted on tonight, and that Heston Hall could possibly wait till the next meeting, but is forthcoming as well. So I don't know what the questions are with that. I mean, we can certainly address them when Mr. Murphy comes in.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So Mr. Murphy is representing the applicants in both of these cases, so it would be appropriate to let him in so we can begin the process of considering these at this point, or whatever the board wants to do at that point.
Let's invite Mr. Murphy in then.
Mr. Murphy did communicate with me, had some problems. He was trying to email me earlier. They did not come through or text me. So there may be some technical difficulties he has too in terms of participating. I'm not sure.
He's coming in right now.
Is he? Okay, good. All right.
Hey, guys. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Murphy.
Well, let's do the first one first, Heston Hall. Now,
this is the one that the board saw first in the spring before we made an application to the zoning hearing board seeking certain items of zoning relief to enable the Heston Hall complex in and of itself to be created on a separate lot, separate from the undeveloped portion of Flowers Field of Edgewood. We then went to the zoning hearing board, got the relief that we had suggested to your group that we needed, then submitted the minor subdivision plan. That's been reviewed in the normal course, went to your planning commission, got a favorable recommendation, and it's back in front of you this evening for consideration of approval of that minor subdivision. We have no issue with the review letter issued by your township engineer of July 9, and other than a handful of pretty typical waivers, I think the plan's clean and ready to move forward.
It's my understanding, Mr. Pokel, that you do not oppose the waiver requests that are in the application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I do not oppose them.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to consider the approval of minor subdivision.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Mr. McCartney seconds. All right, any questions from the board?
I'll go first, Mr. Murphy. The items 1 through 20 in the comments from the Remington Vernick letter, have those been addressed in the plans? And have they been provided to the engineers?
I believe, subject to Andy's confirmation, the answer is yeah, we have addressed those things. They're all will comply items, Mr. Lewis, so
Yeah.
not an issue for us.
Yeah, no. Andy, is that correct?
I don't know that I have a revised submission. No, I mean, I didn't see a revised submission.
Okay. Either way, I mean, we have no issue with those comments, and they're all will complies.
And that would be a part of
I
our
thought that was in process, but if you haven't received it, fine.
at the application
It's
would be
obviously
conditioned upon
conditioned.
satisfying compliance with all the terms and conditions set forth in the Remington and Vernick Engineers July 9th, 2020 review letter.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Murphy, is the developer, my primary understanding is this is done for financial purposes, subdivision, or as part of the development?
No, it's being done, John, to enable the constructed portion of Heston Hall, which is the existing building that you see out there today, to be on its own separate lot, as opposed to the undeveloped portion of the balance of the job, which it currently is a part of. So the lender has asked that the financing be segregated to Heston Hall that stands on its own and the balance of the undeveloped approved section that has not yet been built.
Okay. And then
Nothing changing elsewise. There's no advantage being sought to increase density or change anything else that exists out there now or as has been approved already. Nothing is changing.
Sure, excellent. Now, the developer in question, are they in full compliance with all the requirements on all their developments in Lower Makefield Township and have paid all their fees?
I'll defer to Kurt on that issue because you raised it previously, the last time this project was in front of you.
And I think at that time, by the way, I think they were in compliance at that time, but I'm not certain.
No, so there are still, so just so you're aware, Jim Majewski, who's now here, has been working with Barbara Kirk out of Dave Truelove's office to look at particularly, and we know what the issues have been discussed, trees, what have you. So this is going to be the best answer I can give. As we have investigated what those requirements are, what those obligations are, it is ambiguous regarding specifically what has been required of this developer. So as an example, we have a project that a tree replacement plan was not included in the development agreement that was approved for the project, but is on the recorded plan. There's also other things that the developer is entitled to, including a credit back for soil of $8,000 or $8,500. So Barbara and Jim are clearing through all of that for there's two projects that is owed, either with trees or fees in lieu of, then applying the credit that he's actually due that we have quantified that I just mentioned. And I have asked Ed that in the end, if this is being run through with lawyers and our lawyer, will they agree to pay? And I will defer to Ed to answer that question. So there still is an outstanding amount. However, it has been more complicated getting a specific answer around what that is because of the fact that some of these things were not incorporated specifically into the development agreement. Barbara is working through, has pulled the recorded plans and is deciphering that out and has been for the last week. So in my conversations with Ed, he is aware that we have been working to do that. Ed, I don't know if you care to comment. I don't want to speak before you regarding what happens when Barbara Kirk comes back with what that final number is.
What Kurt just summarized for the benefit of the board is accurate. Mr. Lewis raised the issue previously. We followed up immediately thereafter and provided the township with what our records indicated. And as Kurt just said, they've been doing the same thing at the township end. And what we said was, and Kurt's correct, is that at the end of the day, when we sit down and figure it out, we will certainly satisfy any obligation that we all agree is due. It's been a transparent process with Kurt and Barbara and Jim, and I've been a part of it. So it will be taken care of. That's all. So.
Yeah. And Mr. Ferguson, rough idea of where we think the dollar volume is on this? Is it low 5 figures, mid 5 figures, or higher?
I don't want to,
Kurt, I believe the amount is somewhere in the range of about under $35,000.
Okay.
That's the total.
That's okay. Mr. Murphy, with respect, you have a deadline on this particular need. When is this deadline?
Well, the deadline has come and gone, and we're anxious to do it. But just so you know, John, we've agreed, and as part of the draft of the approval letter, it requires the payment of all agreed upon appropriate fees in a sort of catch-all condition, and that is designed to cover the situation that we've just spoken about. So I think we've covered the issue to give all of us the time to sort it out, and principally it's at the township end now to sort it out and get back to us. So I think you are adequate. Well, I'll defer to Dave, but I think you're covered in that regard. So,
Well, yeah, I would agree. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this. I understand some of the frustration, I guess, from the board side. On the other hand, I think we have to be very careful about conditioning approval on certain things that are not directly relevant to this particular project. That's the other thing too. I want to be careful.
I mean, I do want to say, John, I do want to say this, because this has not just been something you've been asking. Frankly, it's been something I've been asking, and it's something that I know others are asking. The hope here was tonight was to, and because I asked Jim and Barbara a week ago to sit and go through all this stuff, and unfortunately, it was not nearly as clear as I think as even Jim thought it would be. It was just not possible to put that together tonight, not because of a lack of effort, but just because it is not specifically at our fingertips.
So can I ask a quick legal question, which might expedite the discussion, which is if the applicant is agreeing to all the terms in the resolution, does that, and we pass this subdivision plan, and then later does not agree to the terms and conditions or can't come to an agreement with us, they still have the subdivision in place, correct? Meaning it's not reversible or revocable.
Yes, because that's really kind of a legal, although they have to file certain cross easements and things like that, and there's other conditions to comply with. There may be other related issues down the road if applications are made that might affect that.
Yeah, and I don't want to. Mr. Murphy, I apologize. Mr. Grenier was hoping to ask some of the questions and his concerns, so I don't. You're not getting all of them. You're just getting mine, or part of his, I think. Is there a way that we can make it effective on a certain date, say a week from now, and allow the township to resolve this with the developer and developers council? Meaning get approval, but the approval is effective of a certain date.
Well, the approval is going to be a conditional one, assuming the board approves it. And one of those conditions, John, is apparently our submission of the revised plans for Andy to review and confirm that the conditions in his July 9 letter have been satisfied. That process is going to take a couple weeks, I assume. And look, what Kurt said earlier is accurate. I had thought that the issue of any fees that were owed would be resolved long before now, and we wouldn't even have to be talking about this tonight. But for the reasons Kurt said, it's still open. My guess is we will easily address that issue while Andy's reviewing the revised plan set that's going to be submitted, because I don't think we're that far away from understanding what, if any, issues there are. So those are both conditions of approval. We're not going to be able to record the plan anyway until Andy gives us the blessing, and by then I think the issue of the fees should be long resolved.
So Andy, can I ask that before you administer the blessing, and remember Dominus Vobiscum, it's Latin.
Spiro 220.
Check with Mr. Majewski and Mr. Ferguson, just to make sure everything has been resolved.
Sure.
And that would normally be the case anyway, as part of the administration's release of the plans for recording, would be all the conditions of approval would need to be satisfied. So.
Right. And it's my understanding that both township supervisors and myself have to sign the plan.
Oh,
Correct.
well, there you go.
And they are actually due a credit for $8,500. So that amount I quoted earlier is lower. It's somewhere around $25,000 total between all projects.
On the worst case basis, I think Jim's right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Monica, do we have any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay, hearing no further comment on the approval of the minor subdivision for Heston Hall and Flowers Fields at Edgewood. All those in favor, raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
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 Did we have a motion on this one?
Oh, did we? We had a lot of discussion.
I don't recall hearing a motion.
What?
There was a motion and a second.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think, yeah.
Suzanne made the motion and
That's right, and
James.
James.
James second.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
That's true.
All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Okay.
And now the next project is Aaron Dobry Road. You may recall that this is at the location on the west side of Oxford Valley Road, across from the Tanglewood development, south of the Makefield Executive Quarters, north of Regency and that area. Well, yeah, Regency in that area. On the other side of Dobry Road from this is the Caddis development, which was approved, and there's been a lot of discussion about apportionment of road improvement costs, things like that. There's a fair number of waivers requested. I know that Mr. Pokel's office has weighed in on these, so the approval letter is very extensive at this point. I don't want to read it all to the record, but I would defer to Mr. Murphy if he wants to give a little more detail to what the project is, and also to Mr. Pokel if he has any comments about any of the different, both the waivers and any other comments from any other entity as well. So,
Dave, I'm sorry. Can I, before you get started, Ed, just because I know we have someone taking minutes, and I want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding from a question that Mr. Lewis asked Mr. Majewski. And I thought I heard Mr. Majewski. He may or may not have, but I heard him say something, and I wanted to make sure I caught. So when the question was asked, John, when you said how much is owed, I just want to make sure for the record it was clear that Jim estimated it was about 35,000. Over my monitor, it sounded like he said
130.
yeah, likewise, yeah.
So and again, he's being, it's not a specific number. He's saying roughly 35,000, and it was like I thought I heard him say 135, and I just want to make sure that I put it out there that our rough estimate is 35,000, only because then if we come back, because that's how I heard it, John, and I know you've been paying attention to this, if we came back and said something like 37 or 32, that didn't, you know what I'm saying? So I just want to.
Yep, no problem. Yeah.
If I said that, that was my error. I apologize.
You didn't say it. I was listening. You didn't say it.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ed.
Well, on to what we refer to as the Aaron project on Dobry Road. Dave's summary, I think, is accurate. This project has been in front of the various boards and commissions in the township for 5 years. If you looked at the draft approval letter, the first date of plan submission was January of 15. So we're approaching the end of the 5 years, but it's been through many, many, many iterations. And we are at a point where I think we're at a point where we're ready to move forward. Dave did prepare a draft of an approval letter, which he was kind enough to circulate. Reconstruction of Dobry Road, which is probably the most significant design element involving this project, and Caddis across the street. I'm happy to report that reached between the stakeholders, meaning the developers on either side of the road, to allocate the cost for the reconstruction of the road in its entirety in accordance with the township approved plans. I would say that Kurt and Jim and Andy were instrumental in helping to reach that agreement, which is a written agreement that's literally being circulated for signature.
Mr. Murphy, I'm having a hard time hearing you. You're cutting in and out.
Yeah.
There were some technical difficulties with Mr. Murphy.
Hold on one second. He does live there up there in Timbuktu, so.
Application of the reconstruction of Dobry Road is complete. And So I think we're ready to move ahead. We're anxious to get that work started and this other project started, which is part of that work. And I'm not sure what questions Mr. Grenier may have had about any aspect of it, but perhaps Andy would touch on those if he wants to. Dave mentioned there were a handful of waivers, most of which were addressed previously when we dealt with the preliminary plan approval. This is a final plan approval.
Yes.
And but Andy, I'll defer to you if there's any specific items that are new that you want to refer to, but I think we're ready to.
Having audio again.
Yeah, Mr. Murphy, we're having difficulty hearing you, but seeing as how you deferred to me on some of these items, I think that some of the main concerns, so to speak, or items within my review letter, there were a couple that involved the zoning section of the ordinance. And so I think that it would be appropriate to review those to make sure that the board doesn't have any reservations in sending the development back to the zoning hearing board. And then I can provide an update for just basically what was provided, the new information that's provided in this submission, as opposed to the previous submission that the board had looked at, or the, I think that would be appropriate to go over those.
All right, well, I'm looking at the draft of the approval letter. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, right now, yes.
Okay, and I'm looking at the section that talks about additional zoning ordinance comments. I'm not sure, I'm happy to go over them, but I'm not sure they're particularly open or relevant. The first one talks about paying a fee in lieu of recreation. I think, and Jim Majewski's here, I think, and Kurt's here, we've already been through, calculated and agreed upon what that fee is. So I'm not sure that, other than that, that's the response. And I'm looking at Kurt, if he wants to unmute himself, he can, or Jim can confirm that, but I think we're fine there.
Everything on the project is paid up. There's not anything owed. Everything is paid up. I know that.
Right, but this comment is prospective, making sure.
No,
the fee
that is, but I'm saying everything else leading into the project is paid up. There's nothing else.
Yep.
We have this fee in lieu of sitting.
Okay. Item 2 talks about, which is a standard condition, that we would have to provide to Dave's office the homeowner association documentation associated with the maintenance of the open space and those things not being dedicated. And as a condition of approval, Dave's office would have to review and approve those HOA documents. Item 3, I'm not sure why it's a zoning issue that deals with the Act 537 approval, Andy, but that's a condition of approval. And the last item that we've talked about incessantly for years is this whole business of the wetland buffer averaging and all that kind of stuff at the end of the road where it runs into the railroad. And Andy, I think we've already satisfied that. I think you've confirmed that, but
well,
I don't know if there's anything else.
So the only thing that's changed since the last submission was that the limits of the wetlands have changed. I believe back in April, and your engineer can correct me if I'm misstating anything, but I believe a jurisdictional determination was completed for the limits of the wetlands, and the wetlands down in that area had expanded. And therefore that kicked the development into an area where it would not meet the wetland buffer as required in the zoning code unless a wetland buffer averaging calculation was implemented, which the developer or which the engineer provided to us. We agree with those calculations. But the zoning code specifically states that a justification for using the buffer averaging should be based on unique site conditions. And so that justification, I believe it's in the board's, in the township's best interest for the board to hear that justification so that they can opine on that.
Mark Havers, our engineer, is part of the group. And Mark, if you've been listening, why don't you address Andy's question?
Sure. There was actually two jurisdictional determinations on one when the project originally started in 2014-15. That expired, and then it was updated just recently, earlier this year. Since when the original was done and the update was done, several things have happened. One, the township has stopped mowing and maintaining that ditch. That has actually caused the wetlands to expand slightly. Dobie Road is in the process of being expanded, and the Caddis development is actually piping water over into that area as well. So those things in combination have expanded the wetlands beyond where they originally were. To compensate for the buffer, buffer averaged on our side, and we actually even did a calculation for the other side, expanded that buffer as well to protect the woodlands and additional buffering there, and we will exceed the required buffer averaging numbers.
I would agree with that assessment. So, I mean, provided that the board accepts that justification, then I think that the plan, no variance would be required. So then the next item that's changed was that there was the EAC had raised a point, and I after reviewing their comments and taking that under advisement, I confirmed that there was a situation where one of the stormwater management systems, let me take a little bit of a step back. A lot of the waivers that are included here involve infiltration testing. It is my belief and it's my understanding that we are requiring the contract or the developer to complete infiltration testing prior to the start of construction on additional areas on site where they show proposed rain gardens. Now, in addition to showing the rain gardens, they've also designed an underdrain system that is a DEP best management practice for areas where they don't get infiltration. So even if the infiltration testing fails in the area of the rain gardens and shows that there's a zero infiltration rate, the water would drain down through the rain garden and into these underdrain systems, which would then be piped over to the stormwater management basin, and then the flow would be controlled and exit the site through that controlled best management practice. And so that is an approved DEP method for water meeting the water quality requirements when you don't have infiltration on site. But at the same time, I think it's necessary to at least provide additional infiltration testing to ensure that if there is areas where we can infiltrate on site, then we would maximize that capability.
So, Andy, if I could interrupt, the Saldo ordinance requires 11 infiltration test pits. They use 6. Are you saying that they should use 11?
I'm saying that they should work with the township engineer for the number and location of test pits that we deem appropriate.
And I thought we had agreed to that previously, Andy, when we were at the planning commission, when we had the same conversation. So
Yeah,
Dave, that's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, I believe that we were on the same page there, but I just, that should be stated. Another item was,
we revise this whenever consistent.
Another item was that the one of the basins, which is a wet pond, and we'll have an aerator in there to ensure that mosquitoes don't breed in that area. The wet pond was over 20,000 square feet, and a wet pond of that size had to have a buffer. The exact number, I'm drawing a blank on what that buffer was, but the development was did not meet that buffer requirement. And since then, the design engineer has indicated that they are going to reduce the size of that wet pond to less than 20,000 square feet to meet the requirement. And we have, and we've looked at calculations where they can still meet the stormwater management, water quality requirements and the flood control requirements if they make that minor revision to that basin. And so that was another change.
Right. And again, we reviewed that at the planning commission and we had the same conversation and we said the same thing and Andy's response was the same. Correct.
The only other item that, Mr. Murphy had indicated that before, that there's an agreement in place for a payment or a cost sharing for the construction of Dobry Road. And so I think that's that should be stated that is part of the plan for this development, is that they will be participating in reconstructing all of Dobry Road from Oxford Valley Road down to the end of the roadway.
And I would suggest for Dave's benefit, if he wants to incorporate the terms of that agreement that I just made reference, that's fine, because that is part of the record and it's part of an agreement between this developer and the Caddis across the street. Correct.
And so we haven't received a revised submission again from our June 5th letter, but that was mostly for, I believe, for clarity's purposes, so that it doesn't confuse which plan set would govern. I anticipate that the applicant's design engineer is going to be resubmitting shortly after this meeting and addressing all of the other comments that we have in our review letter.
They're ready to go, but for the reason Andy just stated, we had deferred submitting it, but it'll be submitted within a couple days. Yes.
Okay. Any other comments, Mr. Pokel?
No.
Okay. If the board is inclined to consider a motion to approve tonight, I think it would be to approve the final land development for this project, consistent with the conditions set forth in the draft approval letter that I drafted with help from several people, including Mr. Pokel, subject to modifications as stated by Mr. Pokel tonight with respect to stormwater management issues. And I will enumerate those because we could do that separately in the letter. We already have those, as well as confirming the agreement with the neighboring developer, Caddis, regarding cost sharing for the road reconstruction. Does that make sense to you, Mr. Pokel?
It does.
Okay. And Mr. Murphy, would you accept those conditions?
Yes, and we'll provide you with a signed, executed copy of that cost sharing agreement.
Okay.
So yes, those conditions, as you previously outlined and as we discussed tonight, are acceptable.
So that would be if supervisors are inclined to make that motion, not necessarily to agree with all that right now, because obviously there may be questions, but that would be, I think the motion would be appropriate before the board to have to initiate discussion.
So Dave, do I need to reiterate everything that you said consistent with the draft approval of
You can just incorporate what I just said. Okay. It's on the record. Hopefully I'll be able to.
And so moved.
I hear a second.
A second.
Mr. McCarthy takes a second. All right. Any comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Murphy, do you have a facade rendering of the proposed development?
John, I don't think we have anything new that we haven't showed with you or shared with you previously, but I don't have anything.
Yeah, the last time I saw this, I think, was 2019,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I was a liaison of the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And at that time, I had asked for facade variation between the buildings.
You did.
For aesthetics.
Correct.
I didn't specify design specs or anything like that, just variation in general. And I haven't seen a rendering since then.
Those are being prepared because this developer is in the process of marketing it to ultimately the person that's going to be building the units. And when those are available, you can condition issuance of a building permit on our submission of those, but we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
And everyone is aware of your interest in that, and we acknowledge and agree. Yes.
Okay. Can that be placed in the approval letter as well? That building permits.
Prior to the issuance of building permit, applicant will submit the elevations for the units. Yeah.
Okay. And the facades will be varied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, for your review. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not, unfortunately, with Dan not here, I'm not qualified to enter into the discussion about pit length or total number of pits or stormwater basins. So that he had some concerns, but I'm hoping there's if one of the options, and I would offer this to my fellow board members, is potentially, how long do you think it would take, Mr. Murphy, for the agreement to be drafted and finalized between you and the solicitor?
The approval agreement, I'm sure Dave will do so in another couple days and send it out by the beginning of the week, I would think. That's what
Generally, my practice is I do something ahead of time and I run it by the township professionals as well as the applicant's attorney, not to get their approval, but just to make sure we're
covered,
literally on the same page, and then we kind of work from there as a working document.
Yeah, no, and my suggestion, only because I want to be respectful of fellow board members, is that potentially that all could be done and then final approval could be given on our September 2nd meeting, possibly. And that would give Supervisor Grenier a chance to weigh in if he had concerns on some.
I think the only problem with that, John, I think, is that the extension, I believe, according to Mr. Majewski's email to me, that will be past the deadline on the extension.
The only other thing that I would offer to the board is, again, I'm expecting a resubmission of a plan set and stormwater management calculations to address the comments that I've had in the plan reviews. I still have to sign off on that final set prior to an approval. And so if Mr. Grenier has any questions that he wants to pose to me, he can reach out to me. And
that would have been my response, John, because nobody's going to believe what we tell you anyway. So
yeah, no, that would work better for me anyway. So if Andy, if it would be okay with you, once you get those plans, could you reach out to Mr. Grenier and or Supervisor Grenier and talk with him, make sure he's good?
Sure.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think that suffices my concerns, and I wanted to represent Mr. Grenier's thoughts on this. Unfortunately, I don't have his expertise on this. So,
and one of the nice things we have in this township is a very professional township engineer and a code planner, Mr. Majewski, two very qualified professional engineers who can assist the developer in the proper amount. And once we get that amount, the board will definitely hear about it. And if we have to comment further, we will. Ms. Blunday or Mr. McCartney, do you have any questions or comments to Mr. Murphy?
Not at this time.
In that case, open up to public comment. Monica, is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, we'll call the question. All those in favor of the final approval for the area development Dover Road subdivision as spoken, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good evening.
I will work on that letter the next, probably tomorrow morning, well, or maybe later in the day, but somehow I will get it out to Mr. Pokel, Mr. Majewski, and Mr. Murphy, and we'll be working with the same guy.
Later today, Dave? Later today?
Later, yeah, perhaps, yes.
You never know, Mr. Murphy.
Executive session.
Somehow I think not.
Good night.
Good luck.
All right. Mr. Trudeau, we have one more consideration.
That's, I think, Mr. Pokel or Mr. Majewski or Mr. Ferguson's purview. I'm usually not involved directly in escrow release consideration.
Okay. Mr.
I'm
Pokel,
conflicting, so I'm not involved with that.
Mr. Ferguson,
If I may,
Mr.
this
Majewski.
is for the Pennsbury Middle School campus project. You may recall, I believe Supervisor Lewis was the only one involved going back at that time when it was approved. But the Pennsbury School District had come in, got approval for the renovations that were done in the Penwood Middle School that involved realignment of the school, bus drop-off and pickup location, parking, expanded parking where they had a tennis court, and having a visitor area with controlled access for the Penwood Middle School. That plan also included renovations on the exterior to the Charles Bain School that included their bus parking area and other various circulation improvements that have not been done. The improvements had been done. The design actually was by Remington and Vernick engineers. And so they can't release the escrow on that. Boucher and James had inspected all the work that was done over the last couple of years. They had sent a request for the escrow release from the school district, and I went and reviewed that just to make sure that the information on it was accurate. And based on my inspection of the property, the work that listed in my letter is the extent of what can be released. So basically, we recommend the release of $2,478,570.00 to the developer. And the amount of the financial security remaining, including contingency to be held, is $2,066,920.95.
We'll entertain a motion to escrow release number 1 for this Pennsbury Middle School improvements.
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. McGuire makes the second. Any comments or questions from the board?
Jim, could you detail it out a little bit more? I was doing fine until you named the firm involved, and I just want to make sure that we have as much information as possible in terms of what is the release of the $2 million for, and your comfort with the review process.
Sure. I'll just take a second to pull that up. Basically, the release was for a lot of the erosion and sediment control items that had been installed as part of the Penwood Middle School campus project. There's still security remaining for the Charles Bain expansion that is on hold presently by the school district. It also releases money for demolition work that had been required as part of that realignment and reconfiguration of the Pennsbury Middle School with their improvements, for demolition work, for earthwork, storm drainage work that had been done. Also included in that the paving work that is still remaining to be done. In addition, concrete work and landscaping that have been installed in and around the Penwood Middle School complex. So essentially, roughly about half the work, a little more than half the work is done on the project. They're 2/9 of the way remaining to be completed.
Thank you.
Jim, I seem to remember a year or so ago, there was an issue with, I don't know, with the sewer drain or pipe that, with the school, that the school district was asking us to pay for. Do you remember anything like that, or am I mistaken in my recollection? Or did this have anything to do with it?
This has nothing to do with that. I believe that issue was addressed by our Public Works Director, Mr. Hucklebridge. I'm not sure what the ultimate outcome was, but I thought I recall that Pennsbury School District did do that work at their expense.
Okay.
And that's my recollection as well, Mr. Majewski.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions from the board? We'll open up the public comment then. Monica, is there anybody waiting on the line?
No public comment.
Hearing no further comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor of releasing escrow release 1 for the Pennsbury School District, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Okay, very good. Next on is public comment for non-agenda items. So Monica?
No public comment.
No public comment, okay. We'll move to item 15, the discussion items. First is a discussion item about composing a letter to the Postmaster General on keeping the Ardley Post Office open on Saturday. Ms. Bundy?
Yeah, so when this came to my attention, I was concerned just in a general sense, meaning, we like post office. It's convenient to people to have the local option. I know on the southern end of the township, people go to the Morrisville one, but it's always good to have more availability. More recently, and I don't even mean just COVID, but more recently, some of the news stories, or at least, are concerning about whether or not our post office is, the postal system, I guess, is under some type of siege. And I don't want to get too much into that. I think we can really just write a letter. I would urge us to write a letter to the Master General, the Inspector General, asking that they not close the office. So I have put together some words, which I have to admit are not the most compelling. I left out any mention of Benjamin Franklin, although he was there for a little bit. So I'm not really sure, do we just keep discussing it and then I can circulate a draft to everybody, or how would you like to proceed?
Suzanne, you're asking for Saturday or just in general?
So what they've announced is that they're going to close it on Saturdays. So I did frame the draft, and the draft that I would circulate would be a little bit more loose, just in case there's any further consideration about limiting hours.
I would generally be in support of this letter. And I'm just trying to look something up to add to the letter. I believe Lower Makefield is the largest municipality in the United States of America without its own post office.
That's true, I think, Mr. Lewis. That's been discussed for quite a while.
And while the Yardley Borough Post Office is a sort of an adjunct to the Morrisville and the 19067, it's not a very large post office, and its hours are somewhat limited, but it does serve a significant population of people. So I think those would be compelling points to add in there along with our letter.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I thought about that, but in these days of social distancing, even having the option of a small post office has its benefits. So
I think it's a good idea. I think maybe after the draft is circulated amongst us, maybe we can circulate it amongst the Yardley Borough Council, since it affects them more directly. And we can be proactive about that. We can actually talk to, we can send it through their borough manager, and they can look at it and help edit if they wish.
So I guess then we've discussed, and I will circulate a draft to everybody, and hopefully, do we need it to bring it back next time to move forward with the letter? Because I won't say there's some kind of urgency, and yet this was supposed to be on an agenda a few weeks ago, but with everything that happened, it got moved, and I would like to get the letter out sooner rather than later.
I may make a suggestion. I mean, to me, if you all agree in concept to send a letter out, I would think that you all by consensus, it's not like you're going to make a letter public when you send it. It's not going to be a privileged document. That if you all by consensus pass that and come up with a final version that you like, Dave, you can weigh in if you think I'm wrong, but that you could send that letter out. It's not, I mean, that's at your discretion.
Okay, good. Then
Or we can even make a quick motion if that's amenable too. I don't think there's any disagreement.
Yep. Do it any way you want. If it's a consensus to have the letter written and have it out by say a week from now, I don't think we need a motion for that. We can publicize.
If we don't need a motion, let's not make a motion. I'll draft it, I'll circulate it, and we'll aim to get it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Works for me. Next item for discussion is a sewer customer benefit fund.
Yeah, and I think this is truly just a discussion item and the beginning of what I think will be many discussions. But when I voted last week to move forward with selling our pipes, I would like to construct and talk with all of you about what you think the best way to construct a sewer customer benefit fund, with the purpose of the money being placed in the fund to help control rates over the next period of time. So there's a lot that we have to work through together. Period of time, control rates. These are all things that we're going to have some discussions about. So I put that idea out there.
If you don't mind, if I would just add, I mean, there's a considerable portion of that discussion that's in the weeds as far as legally how that's framed and stuff that I'm sure, Suzanne, you'd find very interesting, because a lot of that is sort of legalese stuff that's way over my head. I think generally, if you're talking about that, PFM did have this discussion generically about financial runs with, dollar amounts and what that could translate to, and, annual increases not to exceed a certain amount of money. I think what they talk about obviously is, at least with the winning bidders presentation, there would be a period of about 4 years that there would not be an increase. That obviously, at least on the surface, presumably, you could still dip into that fund during those years that there's no increase. But if you didn't, it would have a chance to grow even in today's limited interest rates. And then the discussion, I think, for the board is if you want to do that, then to what extent you want to help assist rates or manage rate increases. And obviously, the more aggressive you are in limiting those increases, the shorter time frame that money will last. I think in PFM's presentation, what they had talked about was, just as a basis of discussion, was if you didn't use those monies in the first 4 years where rates are flat, that essentially you could have it created where you could manage to create a no more than 3% annual increase in rates that would take it out to year 15 or 16, and much of the money would be gone. Or if you did that where the increase was no more than 5% a year, at the end of that time frame, you would have considerably more money left. And the one caveat with that would be in the end, the thing that becomes hard to quantify is that if you had an increase, for example, you all said we won't have an increase of over 5% and the money lasted a much longer period of time, and future rate increases were less than that, then at least in theory, you would not be having to dip into those funds into that particular year. I think from the perspective of the board, the question just is where would you want to draw that rate increase as sort of as a benchmark year over year if you were to establish that fund. So I think those are the basic points, and then the legalese as far as how that's managed, how that is protected, how that grows, how that's administered. I think those are secondary after the board makes decisions on if to do it and then to what scope or scale to do it.
A long-term rate stabilization was one of the requirements for this whole exercise. So I think starting the process of developing some type of fund to keep rates stable over the long term is something that we definitely should consider. And I'm sure that our legal team and our financial analysts can help us work something out within the next year, if that's where we want to go.
Yeah, I would be behind something like that.
Yeah. John?
Yeah, this is tough. I have tremendous misgivings. This is essentially the Ethan Schiller plan from last year and the baseball mitt stuff. And my issue first off is we're essentially paying back the acquirer with the money they gave us so that they don't gouge us on rates. Well, we made a decision, or in theory, we've made a decision. We passed a resolution. That resolution, we don't have a final agreement with the acquirer, and we don't have PUC approval from the acquirer. So I would say that it's very, very premature to suggest that, that this money is already here and then we can start spending it already. So first, if we were going to think about this, I would significantly caution the board from attempting to use PFM again. This is similar to the issue they've had with Limerick. I find it preposterous, essentially, to create a customer benefit fund to pay back the company that acquired us for the fees that they're going to gouge us in the first 10 years and hope that years 20 through 50, everything's going to be okay. That was a bad decision. And right now, if you have that money, the essence is how do you maximize the value for the township in the long run? So the net money after we paid off the debts, I was at $35 million or something like that. After we paid off all the sewer debts, or is it less? I mean, it's
27 million.
27 million. Okay. So that $27 million can be invested as an endowment that provides recurring income stream to the township that can mitigate other expenses of the township. So why specify that for ratepayers? We've already decided we really don't care about ratepayers long run. Why don't we just
John,
say?
I'd love to hear your idea.
Pardon?
But try not to disparage me while you talk about it. I do care about ratepayers. I do care about ratepayers. Stop saying we don't care about ratepayers. Stop editorializing as you voice your very rightful opinion. I'm happy to hear and discuss and learn from you. But your soliloquy where you keep taking jabs diminishes the points you make and really just makes me want to jump up and scream. So please share with me your wisdom, but try not to keep taking punches.
If you'll pardon me, you interrupted me?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And it's common with you, but that's fine.
It's common for you to be disrespectful and continue.
Ms. Blondie, I'm sorry, Ms. Blondie, Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Chair, I don't think I said anything inappropriate.
Let me be the traffic cop here, please. That's my job as the chair. Each has a chance to speak. Each shall be mindful that we are talking about the discussion of establishing a customer benefit fund, which this board from day one said that rates were amongst all the qualifications. Rate stabilization was a qualification for how we would proceed. So number one, Mr. Lewis, when you said that the board does not care about customer rates, that is an error. And as a matter of record, so as Ms. Blundy said, editorializing does not do any good for the fellow decision makers on the board. So if you wish to make a soliloquy, you can do that on your own time. But if you want to keep your views on the pros or cons of this topic, please do.
Okay, so I was interrupted and the other speaker spoke longer than I did. So I guess I'm under a 30-second rule. How much longer can I speak, Mr. Chairman? Should I expect more interruptions? Do I need to speak faster?
Do you wish
First
to,
off,
if you wish to speak on this topic, you can take all your time you want.
Okay.
If you want to editorialize on something else or make lies, then no, I will stop you. If you treat the other supervisors with disrespect,
I did not use an
I
ad
will
hominem
stop
attack.
you.
Mr. Chair, I didn't.
Mr. Lewis, I am speaking as chair. You may speak as long as you want on the discussion item. If you wish to veer from the course, I will ask you hold your tongue until another day. So do you wish to discuss this issue? Do you wish to say, yes, I would like to discuss it, or not discuss it? But if you're going to, as Ms. Blundy said, disparage the public with lies, or disparage the public with things that are not germane to this discussion item, then don't bother us, because we're the decision makers and you're talking to the board, not to the public. So if you wish to discuss this topic with us,
Mr. Solicitor, point of order. You listened to what I said. Did I make any ad hominem attacks at anybody? Did I mention anybody by name?
You
the
know,
subject was
I don't know that that's a solicitor's opinion to provide that.
You made a very clear point that this board does not care about rates. That is a lie.
Ratepayers
and the rates. That is a lie. That is something we've been talking about since we started this process over a year ago. So if you wish to discuss anything about how we feel as a board, I'm going to silence you. If you wish,
You're going to silence me.
I will silence you. If you wish to discuss this part on this discussion item, you could talk all day long. So what do you want to do? Do you want to discuss this discussion item, or do you want to discuss something in other business?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
No, Mr. Lewis, I asked you a question. Do you want to answer me? Or do you want to go off on another tangent?
Hey, listen,
I know. No,
I don't want.
I've heard you. I've asked you a question. Do you wish to discuss this topic, or do you wish to talk about something else? If you wish to talk about something else.
I was talking about the topic. I was interrupted and I was attacked.
Miss Blundy had a reason to interrupt you, and I stand by what she was, that interruption. Now, if you wish to come back to the subject.
Are you telling me what I can and can't say?
No, we have a discussion item. You can discuss
Mr. Chair,
listen, Mr. Lewis, I'm not interested.
I've been really polite.
Well, no, you haven't. You've already insulted this board once, but you want to do it again? Go for it. Go for it. You're talking to 33,000 people, but you're talking to the board. This board are the decision makers. We got to decide what to do. You don't want to have it. If it's your contention that a consumer benefit fund or some form where we can stabilize rates is not in the best interest, then that's fine. But see how I said it without saying bad things about somebody else, or about lying about how we care about ratepayers?
Mr. Chair, you just suggested I'm a liar.
No, I didn't suggest. I said you made a false statement, period. That's not suggesting. That's actually accusing you. Now, you want to retract?
That's your opinion. That's your opinion.
No, it's not.
Assessment.
You made an opinion, and I take umbrage to that.
Okay, so you're offended by my opinion.
Yeah,
that's fine.
I offended that when this board made specific on the record statements that stabilization of rates and considering that the ratepayers not pay exorbitant rates in the future into the mix, that what you just said and what Ms. Bundy interrupted you on was a totally appropriate.
So,
So
okay.
what? So what? You want to continue or not? It's a yes or no question, Mr. Lewis. You think you can handle it?
Question politely.
You think you can handle it, Mr. Lewis?
I answered your question.
I'm giving you the same respect that you did with a member of this community previous to this meeting. Now, if you're going to answer the questions, do it. But if you're going to have a discussion, have the discussion with the members of the board and stop with ad hominem attacks.
So, Mr. Chair, I answered your question, yes, but in the difference of time, and because I get the sense that you're not interested in an open dialogue about this policy, I'll yield the reminder of my time.
I'm interested in polite discussion. So if you cannot have polite discussion, then I'm going to go to Mr. McCartney, who hasn't spoken yet, and we'll continue on with the meeting of this, with the business of this meeting. So hearing nothing, Mr. McCartney, do you have anything to say?
No, I think that similar to Suzanne and you know, your take on the rate stabilization fund, it's something that we all considered as a board when we made the decision to sell the sewer system. So I think it's something that's important. It should be looked at and considered based on what Kurt's saying, whether it's going to be minimizing it as a 3% increase or a 5% increase, and having some professionals take a look at what the best option is. I'm definitely on board for.
Great, and we can have PFM, we can have another financial analyst company. That's a discussion for a later date. And if we determine that we decide that there's another way to go, we will do that as well.
So, when I asked that the customer benefit fund be put on the agenda under the discussion items, I didn't think that we were necessarily going to agree on everything tonight. I wasn't even sure what the framework would end up being from the discussion, meaning I think I speak for some of us when I say that the goal of the fund would be to help stabilize going forward. I didn't mean to suggest that we would have to decide tonight if that's 2%, 3%, first 5 years, next 10 years, but really just to start the discussion so that we could keep having it as we move forward. I agree that, we haven't sold, the PUC has not approved, so I'm certainly not suggesting that we take action tonight, but I do think we need to plan and ensure that we discuss it as much as possible so that we ultimately come up with the best solution.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this item? Good. There's another discussion.
Fred, we have public comment on this. Would you like to give public comment?
Sure.
We're going to patch Zach in.
Go ahead, Zach. Unmute yourself, give your full name, address, and make your comment.
Zach, you can press *6 to unmute.
All right, Zach.
Zachary Rubin, 1661 Covington Road. I'd like to amplify Supervisor Lewis's comments. The Sewer Customer Benefit Fund will be funded by proceeds from the sale of our sewer system. Therefore, the money that will be in this fund basically will be given back to Aqua America by using this fund. Hypothetical, if $53 million are selling it to Aqua America, and let's say the fund we put in, let's say $18 million or $17 million, then basically we're getting $35 million from the proceeds, which seems like there were other bids around that time. Now, if you're really concerned about rate stabilization concerns, then you should keep ownership of the sewer system where you have complete control of any rate increases in the future. Now, during this meeting, you considered 2 rejections of bids for the sewer projects. So what I would like this board to do is to entertain a motion to reconsider the awarding of the bids. Somebody who voted on the prevailing side can make a motion to reconsider, reject all the bids, and start the bid over again for the sewer system. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rubin, you raise an excellent point. However, you are completely mistaken. This, under our control, and we're going back, I don't know, we can go back 30 or maybe even 40 years. This township failed miserably in maintaining our sewers, kept rates artificially low, and in the last 3 years, our rates jumped 74%, excuse me, and in the next 3 years would jump up another 60% under our control. One of the reasons why we decided to sell this system is because our rates will be stable over the next 10 years. The $50 million capitalization from Makefield Municipal Authority will be spread over hundreds of thousands of customers. And you saw the indicative rates over the next 10 years, of which in the next 4 will be absolutely stable, flat. And in the years from 6 or from 5 to 10 will go up much lower than they would have been if we had not
30 seconds.
sold the system. But I will put it to the board. Is there any member of the board?
Well, Dr. Weiss, before that, can I respond for 2 points with you, if you don't mind?
Sure.
One is I'm asking to rebid it, so I'm not arguing for or against about not selling the sewer system.
I understand.
Okay, that's number one. Okay. Number 2.
I'm sorry. I think I know where you're going. You can correct me if I'm wrong. The bids at $35 million were not significantly lower than the bids at the rates at $50 million. And I'm saying 53, 56, whatever. The rates were not that different. So if we went to $35 million, those slightly lower rates would not be offset by the 17 or 18 million dollars that we would put in a fund or not. So
again, Dr. Weiss, I'm not saying to accept the 35 million bid. I'm just saying to rebid it with different specs and see we might get different.
I understand, and that's also a mistake. That's also a mistaken supposition, and I understand where you might get it. The PFM is one of the foremost financial analysts in public-private partnerships in the country, and their very, very fair evaluation put us between 30 and 37, $38 million. So they were very surprised that we received such high bids as we got. And with the market changing thanks to COVID, we could end up with much less in the next couple of years if we started the process all over again. And that's the opinion of the majority of the board. Mr. Lewis disagrees with me, and I can live with that very much. Is there any other comment?
Dr. Weiss, yes, just another point.
Yes.
We just during this meeting, you just awarded some bids for hundreds of $1,000s for capital expenditures for our sewer system. If we're selling it within a year, why are we making capital expenditures? We're just saving Aqua America money.
And we own the system, and we have a 537 plan that mandates these repairs. And we have a very modest time, very modest repair schedule and a very modest time. I think should this fall through for some reason, we have a 7-year plan at $15 million that the DEP could say we need to speed up, which will cost even more money, which might even cost us more if we do not sell the sewers. But I appreciate your thoughts, Mr. Rubin.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing to that? Just so it's a matter of record. So in the end, there is an obligation that the system be maintained as the way was outlined in the 537 plan, whether we own it or whether someone else owns it. So in the end, you know, if this closes and it takes about a year, we need to ensure that the work in that intervening time period is done. You know, in all likelihood will include early next year some more lining projects to be consistent with the I&I that we need to get out of the system. So as long as we have it, that we can reasonably get that work done, we're under obligation to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Is there any other public comment, Monica?
Yes, there is.
Okay,
Robert's coming in.
we'll try to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. Go ahead, Robert. Full name, address, and you know the rules.
Robert Abrams, 652 Teach Drive. Little point of order here. When I questioned the vote on the sewer the other night, everybody got it. When I asked for everybody to not have any direct or indirect involvement or any family members, all you got up in arms. Yeah, but when you got a low bid today that was 30% lower than somebody else's, all of a sudden you're asking questions. So it's okay for you to ask questions, but it's not okay for the public to question you. I got an issue with that. Let's go here to this customer benefit fund. Number one, I agree with Mr. Rubin. And everything that I told you the other night about you didn't do your due diligence, you didn't put everything up front, you didn't investigate everything you told everybody you were going to investigate, you did none of it. And you're proving it. You just told everybody you did none of it. Now, Mr. Ferguson, let me go to you. All these sewer increases you blamed on excessive rain. Now you're telling us it's 537. You guys got a great way of building trust with the community, I'll tell you that. Now let's go to another point. We sold the cell tower and we got $2.02 million. And Mr. Weiss told us he's going to make $50,000 a year. Now to do that, you would have to leave the principal alone, and you would have to get no less than 2.5%, of which you never did. You're probably somewhere around 0.8 or 0.6 at this point. And now Mr. Ferguson tells us at one of the last 2 or 3 meetings that he's burning off the principal at the amount divided by 35 of the contract. So now every year the principal is less and the interest is less because the principal is less.
Not
so
true.
now you're going to create another customer fund.
Mr. Abrams,
Hold on. Now you're going to create another.
I'll give you your time, but you're making accusations. Let Mr. Ferguson answer your accusation.
Sure. I will. So the money that was received, which was $2 million, was deemed that could not be recognized in the fund balance number. All we're doing every year is recognizing the money in the fund balance. That's all we're doing. We're not moving the money to be spent. It is being recognized in the fund balance. The dollars are still sitting there in that account.
Okay, well, that's not what you said 2 meetings ago.
That is exactly what I said 2 meetings ago.
Okay, so now let's go to this next fund. Now we're going to have a consumer benefit fund, but we don't seem to have, the only way that we can get any guarantees is if you guys are going to sell this off, it has to be written into the total sale contract that there has to be a consumer benefit fund, not after the fact. Because right now, Mr. Ferguson, you're shaking your head no, and I'm telling you, you can go spend off the $47,000 per year any day you feel like it.
Well,
for the last, I guess it's 2 years now, going to be 3 years.
A consumer benefit.
Because that's the way. No, because it's recognized. You just told us it's recognized.
Mr. Abrams.
Now,
Mr. Abrams, please, if you're going to say something that needs an answer. If Mr. Ferguson wants to respond, let him respond. Nobody's rushing you. Go ahead, Mr. Ferguson.
All right, fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Ferguson. Did you want to respond to that?
No. So if the question is, as part of the sale, does a consumer benefit fund have to be drawn into an asset purchase agreement? The answer to that is absolutely not.
Agreed.
So the township, if it gets $53 million for the sale, can make whatever decision it wants to make with that money as part of the sale, debt reduction, any of the things you've talked about, consumer benefit fund. That doesn't need to be drawn into the sale. If the township was interested in creating a consumer benefit fund that was dedicated and obligated to lower rates, the township has the opportunity to put that with legal restrictions that it could not be used for anything else that would be subject to a final public approval.
And I'll agree with everything you just said. But the problem is with the sale of the cell tower, it's not that way. The public here is not getting what it was promised. And again, you're writing into every budget $47,000 or $48,000, whatever the number is, year over year, and you can spend that money any day you want because it's already written into the budget.
Except for the
fact that you chose to leave it there so that we get the interest, that's okay. But you can make any kind of fund you want. You still can't pay the golf course off because some of those bonds aren't callable the way I'm understanding it. And the terror here is whenever you give government money, it just seems to disappear and nobody can answer where it went. And now we're talking about a lot of money. And it should have been part of the total agreement with the community to protect the community. Like, we're right back to, okay, this is the end of my public comment. You didn't do your due diligence. You didn't cross every I and every T, and you just rammed it right up the community and told them, here, take it, whether you like it or not. Well, I don't like it.
Well, that's your choice, Mr. Abrams.
No, had you been truthful and honest with the community, then I probably don't have a choice. But because you weren't truthful and honest with the community, that's where my problem is. Well, because if it happened before, it's going to happen again and again and again.
Well,
thank you and have a good night.
You too.
Night.
I will say, and I'll let you speak, Ms. Bundy, after I do, that is not the case. This is a year and a half discussion, multiple public meetings in multiple venues, getting a very good price. And will protect the not only the ratepayers but the taxpayers for probably a generation. And
Mr. I'm sorry, I want to make one more point, Fred, if I could. He is correct. The board did not sit and bind that money legally to never be spent, meaning the cell tower sale. However, I'd like to point out that since I've come here, we have put a process in showing interfund transfers, that even if we sit and show in the budget that money is going or is being recognized in the fund balance at 1/35 of the amount or $58,000 a year, any movement of that money to spend it, you have the right to do, to be shown and to be approved in an interfund transfer that the board would do before that would happen. So it would not happen outside of the public scope that money was being spent. It would be visible and you all would have to approve it before I would move it to do that.
Right. And the paying off of non-callable debt, we would set up a sinking fund, which is basically a trust that will make sure that the debt is paid and will not. So as far as we're concerned, once this deal is consummated and closed, that will be taken care of as well. Ms. Mundy, you wanted to add to that?
You know, I don't know how to add to it. I struggle because I don't think it serves any purpose to every time we meet go over the same ground, right? But
well, I totally agree, but there's unfortunately a group of people in the township that wishes to hear a narrative that has no basis in reality. And, and there's also a difference of opinion on what the duty of an elected official is and the nature of democracy. But this is for sitting around a bar and having a drink and discussing philosophy. But as far as the reality is concerned, It's hard to say the sky is green when the sky really is blue. And we say the sky is blue. People can say the sky is green. It's okay. But, the reality is that this board makes decisions. We are accountable for the decisions we make. And, we're not saying that we're absolutely right. We make the best decisions with the best information we have. And we try to use those filters that shift truth from non-truth and fact from fiction. And we make our decisions, and we live with those decisions. So is there any other public comment, Monica?
No more public comment.
Okay. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, I'm not going to unpack what you just said there for a moment.
I appreciate, because that was, I was just opining upon Mr. Abrams' comments. So
pardon if I could, because you were interrupting me as I just got a sentence out.
Well, this is public comment, and I just made a comment in response. You wish to make a comment on Mr. Abrams' remarks?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So Township has a number of alternatives to consider when reviewing the proceeds of the sale. It could create an endowment fund that would spin off money every year that could be used for either the general fund or for other funds. It's not obligated to create a customer benefit fund to pay back the company that purchased the sewer system. And you could argue that funds are fungible, meaning that if people are paying less in property taxes, that's money that they would have that they could use for their sewer bills. The other option too, in honesty, because we don't know the full assessment of exactly how high rates will go. But I can say that there are folks who legitimately during this COVID time and depression have need for relief. And if I were going to focus benefit, I might front load the benefit to those people. But again, I don't want to cause you any consternation or concern if I'm disagreeing with you, if I'm saying something you find offensive. So I'll leave it at that. Part of the reason why I asked the township manager for what the fund balance was is there are options that we could take immediate action to help those in need. So that's something to consider at a future date. Again, I remain frustrated, but we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Well, actually, I thought that was a very good comment, John. I appreciate it.
So I will say this. Let me just answer it if I could. I'm happy to give a fund balance number. And again, the fund balance number, it is the sewer fund, which is accounted for differently. It is an enterprise fund. So there's two different things essentially, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds. There's a cash balance for the year, where we are with this year's collections and this year's bills. Then there is the net position of the sewer fund. The net position of the sewer fund, as I've said many times, is currently minus $1.4 million. So that is the net position of the sewer fund. So for example, when comments come up like we did, there wasn't as much rain or what have you, and where'd that money go? It is to offset that negative net position that has been years in the making that currently sits at the amount I just said. So that is the position of the sewer fund, although on the year-to-year basis would show a different number as far as where we landed, where we are this year.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. You said there was no other public comment on this item, Monica?
No public comment.
Okay. We have one more discussion item, is the discussion of formation of an ad hoc committee to evaluate restoration and function of LMT's historic structures. Ms. Bundy?
I'm doing so well tonight. Let me just continue. We have a number of buildings that are owned by the township that are, in various stages of use, lack of use, or however you want to phrase it. Clearly, the one that people talk about most, or the buildings people see most often, are those located on Patterson Farm. And we've struggled, as during my tenure and even previous boards, as to what to do with these structures. So I'm asking to consider forming an ad hoc committee. We would seek representatives from the township, volunteers, to help us look at those buildings, not just those on Patterson Farms. There's one on the golf course. They're sprinkled around, and try to come up with a thoughtful plan on how to best utilize them or make sure that they are maintained appropriately. We've been talking about the township's limited resources, made only more difficult by the current economic matters going on throughout the whole country. So I don't mean to suggest that this committee would be charged to fixing them all up and occupying them. Every kind of creative solution, some which might be painful, would have to be considered by this group of volunteers. So that's what I'm asking us to discuss.
Okay. I definitely think we need to do something about our structures, especially the farm and the building at the golf course. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, we've had on our project updates now for, gosh, must be a year. There's a report that we're supposed to get that's a full inventory of township properties and an estimate of costs associated with that. Where are we on that?
It's currently held up on the cost estimate of it. We've been working with Remington Vernick to come up with a price to help us with that endeavor, and it exceeded our ability to pay for it this year.
Mm-hmm.
So we did put together the report that outlined all of the buildings, the pictures of the buildings, and the most current status report. The cost update, essentially, we haven't met about that recently with what's been going on, but we're going to have to talk with Andy as far as how that may be staged or what buildings we may want to look or prioritize.
And the reason I asked the question, I think we all agree, at least on this, I would hope we agree, that we want a good assessment of where we are, of the properties, that inventory, so that we have a sense of what the challenge is. I'm wondering if the Historic Commission could review the report when it's done and could service perhaps Supervisor Blundy's suggestion and help starting to put together the evaluation and restoration process. I would say a member of the community has reached out to me, and I hesitate sometimes to offer stuff up, but the Master Gardeners of Bucks County previously were in, I guess it's Almshouse Road, County of Bucks had offices, or I don't know who was there. But anyway, they've lost their sort of office building, and there was a discussion around if there's a potential interest in being perhaps a tenant in Patterson Farms and helping with that process. So I know that's something that we should consider. I don't know if that's still operative. I know it's been a couple of weeks since that person reached out to me, but I'm certainly open. I'm wondering if we'd let the Historic Commission review the report and come up with an initial assessment and a strategy.
You mean a cost estimate?
Yeah, I mean, we have to, that I know you're still working on, right?
I mean, the cost estimate is full. I mean, that's why I'm not sure what you're saying. If you're saying like an estimate, like a use, you're talking about like a property use estimate, or are you talking about?
No, my sense was give the Historic Commission the final report on the township properties, let them make an assessment of which ones have historic function, and then help with an initial strategy around how you might tackle this challenge, right? And part of that might be, are there tenants available? Like, for example, the Slack House, which is mentioned in Makefield Highlands, the golf committee and others have looked at that as a potential sort of bed and breakfast concept. But given the costs and challenges, there's been other ideas as well. I'm wondering if the Historic Commission could help with that.
So I think it's going to, my thought, again, just my thoughts, but I think it's going to take a larger effort than just the Historic Commission. And that's why I asked for an ad hoc group, maybe members from the Historic review board are part of it. I welcome all comers. I think we're going to need a mix of volunteers, some who, have a passion for history, some who have some experience in restoration, and some who have, other economic skills. I honestly don't know. I drove by Patterson Farm. I drive by it all the time. I don't see an, easy solution. And I also don't want to lose more time. And I think that's one of the benefits of this ad hoc group. If we vote to establish one, we could start getting resumes, and maybe they can hit the ground running in the fall, and start coming up with these creative solutions.
Yeah, we have the Economic Development Committee, some members, Historic Commission, maybe the HARB, with some architectural people. We can draw from the community at large to figure out priorities, uses, where we allocate our costs, our resources. I think it's a great idea.
If I could just weigh in on what Suzanne said, I know there's been some discussions we've had about committees and being plugged in here. I mean, these right now that are looking to pick up on John's point and then Suzanne's point, who I think have wanted to get their hands into something. And I mean, much like Suzanne just said, there's any number of issues on those properties, like John said, from renovation, from funding strategies like the finance committee to economic development, even for reuse of those properties or use of those properties, that you could get a nice mix from a lot of those committees that deal with all of those topics to get all of that to be considered, because they're all going to need to be considered. And quite frankly, if there's a use on there that someone deems relevant use that the township would be in favor of, that may also frame the terms for the scope of a renovation that you may need to do on some of those properties, other than the Satterthwaite House, which is, we know, in probably the greatest disrepair. So I think something of that sort, where you draw on all those people, really could help give some perspective to the board.
Kurt, would you be amenable to maybe over the next month or two meeting with supervisors specifically to get their thoughts, distill them, and maybe in the next month, we can make some kind of consideration?
Yes, I mean, and again, and I think in the end, we have certain things that we know we have concerns about, that we'd want to convey to the committee, about going into properties and things of that sort. But I think in the end, we start to work on the framework for what they're looking at, what the goals are, and then whatever the board wants to define those goals to be. I think a mission statement for a committee like that would be useful, and then you shape it. I'm happy to facilitate that.
Okay, so if you would be so kind as to speak with the supervisors, because we don't want to, offline, we don't want to break any sunshine rules. So if we can work that way, and then you can, at a subsequent meeting, we can meet, and you can give us a report on the distillation of what what you found, and we can go from there. Does that sound all right to you, the board?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, great. We go to supervisors reports. I'll start off. I have nothing to report other than the Historic Commission is planning a ceremony, I think it's September 16th, to rededicate 6 Civil War graves in the Slate Hill Cemetery. And hopefully we'll hear more from the Historic Commissions on that ceremony. Dan's not here. Ms. Bundy?
The only thing I'd want to say is a quick little story about community involvement. And it starts with a gentleman named Jason, who I didn't ask if I could use his last name. So Jason contacted the Citizens Traffic Committee to talk about an issue near the ShopRite, because that's where he and his family worked. Apparently, Jason has some young children. And he was very upset and concerned about the stop signs, the faded lines, the visual sight lines that had been impaired because of overgrowth of shrubbery. So he reached out, Citizens Traffic got involved, got the police department involved, worked with the landlord of the Kohl's ShopRite, and I hope some of you have had a chance to see those nice bright yellow lines, some re-striping and the loss of some parking spaces near Starbucks, but I think ultimately will make it much safer in that area. Overall, probably some more work to be done there, but a great improvement, all because Jason chose to get involved. So thank you to him. Thank you to the CTC. Thank you to our police department. Thank you to the landlord. I think that's, thanks to everybody, but that's how, as a community, we can move forward, and job well done.
Mr. McCartney?
I have nothing to report at this time.
Mr. Lewis?
The zoning hearing board met yesterday. I was only able to catch the first part of it. I had to go to another meeting. That's all I have for right now. Nothing significant happened in my absence.
I'll go to item 18, appointments to boards and commissions. Since Mr. Grenier isn't here, we have 3 individuals requesting reappointment. Paul Roden for the Environmental Advisory Council, Frederick Young for Electronic Media, and Linda Salvati for the Environmental Advisory Council. So I would entertain a motion to reappoint.
I move that we reappoint those 3 individuals to their respective posts.
I'll second.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 4-0. Thank you very much. Is there any other business before this board? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Have a great night, guys.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.